I'm drawing infinite cards in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276 He Comes, it in number 039, S over. U.S. near border area, New Jersey. It was night, and the uninhabited wilderness was pitch black, with only a few rays of brilliance cast by the faint stars. Several abandoned ancient fortresses and military buildings, like huge tombs, lie on the ground, surrounded by high-voltage grid fences, which have been cut off for an unknown number of years. Two shadows, one big and one small, quietly appeared, and they climbed over the 3-meter-high power grid with great agility, and entered the blocked old military base. The signal disappeared at this point. There should be an instrument for setting up a router and isolating the signal. Natasha held the signal detector in her hand and said helplessly. She turned her head, but saw Steve standing at the door with a dazed expression, staring blankly at the modern-style building in front of her. "What's wrong? Did you find anything?" Natasha asked in surprise. Steve shook his head lightly, and said with emotion, "This is where Kyle and I started from the military, patriarch." Natasha was surprised, and then looked at this humble military base. Her beautiful eyes were full of splendor. "It's fine to cultivate Captain America, but I didn't expect that even the symbol of peace came from here. It's not too much to say that this base is the place where legends rise. During the war era of World War II, when the two soldiers left here, they were like two suns, shining through the darkness and shining brightly in the world. Follow me. The building next to me didn't exist before I left. It should have been added later." Steve waved his hand and led Natasha towards the main entrance of a building. He raised the admin shield, facing the locked gate. It was a direct and violent impact. With a bang, the iron door fell inward, raising a cloud of dust. Looking at the breach, Natasha couldn't help shaking her head secretly, and muttered, as expected of the one who fought with a patriarch before. The two entered it, and when Steve fumbled to turn on the main switch, countless light bulbs flickered, and then the whole building was filled with dim lights again. The interior is obviously the pattern of an underground studio. There are many bookcases for storing files, office desks and chairs, etc. There are also huge photos of people hanging on the walls on both sides of the hall. From left to right, they are Kyle, Fury, and Howard, and finally there's the logo of the eagle, sword and shield combination of shield. This is the first batch of veterans who established shield, Natasha thought for a while, and suddenly realized, so it is. This should be the place where shield was first established. Later, when I was recommended by the patriarch to join, God, the shield headquarters building has been built in New York, and the old site has been abandoned. It was abandoned on the surface, but secretly, there are still people using it. While Steve was talking, he searched with his rich experience in investigation and soon found an underground dark room. They continue to go deep to find out the secrets hidden behind shield. 5 minutes later, the two confronted a supercomputer in the basement. That's right, the enemy is a supercomputer. To be more precise, it is the artificial intelligence used in SHIELD, composed of multi-unit storage machines crowded into a room, plus old-fashioned monitors, dusty cameras, etc. However, this artificial intelligence is not a machine-derived thinking, but a former Hydra scientist who converted his brain memory and consciousness into code data and stored it in the superbrain before his death. For decades, this smart host has been secretly guiding Hydra to conduct a comprehensive secret infiltration of SHIELD, and even deleted Fury's highest authority. This is the most serious mistake since the establishment of SHIELD. It should not have chosen to admit former Hydra scientists to complete the experimental research of transforming humans into machines for the sake of rapid development. Captain Steve, I still remember very clearly that you got on the train with a demon back then, trying to drive us all to death. In the display screen, a skull smiley face made of digital is projected, and the cold mechanical sound is transmitted from the loudspeaker. "It's you," Steve frowned. He remembered, more than 60 years ago, on the high-speed train, the Hydra scientist who was to be captured by the commando mission. In that battle, Bucky fell into the bottom of an ice valley in order to save him. If it weren't for Kyle's Blue Eagle to save the field, all three of them might have died. "Finally think of me," Skull smiled and said triumphantly. "However, among the three of you, there's a soldier who has worked hard for us for the past 10 years, which can be regarded as atonement for his sins." Steve trembled all over, his veins were bulging, and he couldn't hide his anger and said, "Is it Bucky? Where is he now? Tell me, he was the one who attacked Nick Fury in the afternoon. He is still in New York and is safe. But you two are dying." Speaking of this, the skull couldn't hold back, revealing its hidden murderous intent and minions. Kakaka. The main entrance of the basement was suddenly closed automatically, completely sealing off the hall where the supercomputer was stored. "Captain," Natasha looked around, with an ominous premonition in her heart, years of fighting consciousness reminding her to escape here. "What did you do?" Steve was shocked, raised his fist, and with one punch, the screen showing the skull was blown up. But then, another monitor lit up, and the bouncing skull laughed wildly and said, "Since the moment you came in, missiles have been launched targeting this location. I've been stalling for time. There are still 5 seconds left. Everything here will come to naught. There is no time to escape. Damn it." Steve's face changed drastically, and with the fastest speed, he pressed Natasha under him with one hand, and raised the adamant shield high with the other hand, blocking it between the two above the head of the person. The skull was still laughing wildly, acting as the god of death, counting down, 3, 2, 1, next moment. The expected missile bombing did not happen, and it happened that all the sound stopped, and the basement fell into a strange dead silence. Steve was surprised, and looked up at the display screen, but the digital face of the skull was dull, as if even it didn't know what had happened. Skull muttered, doubting his life, "What about the missile? How could this happen?" The missile signal disappeared suddenly. Boom. At the same time, the self-closing underground gate seemed to have suffered a violent impact from the outside, and the steel portal was dented with a huge hammer mark inward. Steve put down his shield and let out a long breath. "Here he comes. It's over." Natasha also spread her hands. Skull didn't know why. In the next moment, the sound of the impact increased several times, and the whole building seemed to tremble violently under the impact. The steel front door, which was theoretically impossible to break through, collapsed under the pressure. At the door, Kyle withdrew his left hand in the shape of a heavy hammer, and walked in with a calm face, holding a piece of metal shell wreckage in his right hand. 1 meter behind, Yutong and Lorna walked into the hall, one left and one right. Chapter 277 Non-combatants, please evacuate. Kyle, Master, Steve and Natasha greeted each other with a smile, as if they had a backbone. The seriousness on their faces just now was gone. "Are you okay?" Kyle nodded in response, and threw the shell wreckage in his right hand to the ground. "It's not dangerous, but what are you?" Steve looked down, looking at the strangely shaped metal shell, and there was still a little black smoke on it. Could it be? Natasha thought of a possibility. Her mouth widened in surprise. Kyle said calmly, "A missile. I just encountered it on the road, and then I smashed it down by the way." "Steve," Natasha patted her forehead, "sure enough, saw a missile on the road and smashed it down. Do you think paper airplanes are so casual and simple?" "Sorry, in front of today's young people, dismantling missiles with bare hands is so casual and simple." "Diddy." The camera on the computer monitor adjusts the direction. Hydra scientists now have no eyes and can only see with the help of the camera. The camera was first aimed at Yutong, and the computer program performed face recognition by the way, and said in a cold mechanical voice, "Yutong Carl, born in 1942, Risen, was originally the most perfect artificial human in Risen's laboratory, and now belongs to the Carl family, one of the big three. Warning. The target is an extremely dangerous person. No contact." The camera continued to rotate, and this time it was aimed at Lorna, who was just walking forward. The mechanical voice had become more human-like in astonishment. "Lorna Dunn, born in Germany in 1993, is a superpower experimenter in the laboratory. Control the magnetic field and positional traction. Warning. This target is extremely dangerous. Catch it carefully." Kyle was slightly taken aback, looked at Lorna, and said with a little surprise, "Are you still a minor? It's only near the end of 2008, a 15 or 6-year-old lolly. Has she matured so quickly and has the demeanor of a royal sister?" Lorna gritted her teeth as if she had seen through her age, and stared coldly at the computer machine. Finally, the camera was fine-tuned, and the lens reflected Kyle's figure. The numbers of the patchwork skull were instantly confused, and the mechanical sound spit out intermittently. "Kyle Doff, born in the United States, a legendary hero, a symbol of peace. It turned out to be you. Warning. The target is the #1 dangerous person. Please flee the scene immediately or self-destruct." The realistic and slightly funny warning sound, After the judgment and recognition of the Hydra database, crazily sounded sharply in the basement. Skull immediately obeyed the official judgment, deleted the built-in data, and started the self-destruct procedure. The situation took a turn for the worse. Several screens displayed blurry screens and a countdown to self-destruction, and some hosts in the room had started to emit smoke. "Kyle, you scared it to self-destruct," Steve said anxiously, feeling a little unbelievable. "Weiss," Kyle nodded and called softly. "I know what to do, Master." From Kyle's body, a small rocket flew out suddenly, transformed into a plug with a front end like a weapon, and sank into the jack of one of the computer hosts. In just 1 second, the black smoke stopped spreading to the other mainframes, and the self-destruct program on the display screen was also turned off. From the loudspeaker, a cold mechanical scream came out. "Who are you? Don't lean over." "Woo-wah. I want it." During the period, he laughed with a hint of wheezy. "Want to die? How can it be so simple? Let the young master teach you." The corner of Kyle's mouth twitched slightly. This dog wheezy, since he ran to Tony's studio, his behavior has become more and more old gentleman. But the wicked have their own grind. Artificial intelligence should be dealt with by artificial intelligence. There's nothing wrong with that. Kyle warned, "Don't just play to death. Set out the database of the Hydra organization and then kill it." "Okay, Master," Weesey replied quickly, immersed in the refreshing feeling of training and beating the villain. It is not like Venom. It can fight side by side with Kyle in the symbiosis of the body, and it is only used as a system support in the steel suit mode. It's a rare opportunity to show off your skills. How could Weesey let it go? Kyle looked at Steve, then at Natasha, and said, "Okay, leave this to me. You two should go now. Go." Steve and Natasha looked at each other and asked in surprise, "Why?" Lorna raised her beautiful face and said coldly, "There are Hydra armed forces gathering here outside. We are covering to attract firepower. You non-combatants evacuate the scene first." "Non-combatants?" Steve's handsome old face froze. This sentence was absolutely ironic to him. No matter how bad it is, he is also the captain of the United States who became famous in World War II. Natasha's face also changed slightly. Anger was revealed in her eyes, and she looked at Lorna with a cold light. She is the Red House of the Soviet Union, the Black Widow of the most outstanding generation of agents. Why is she not a combatant? Okay, the little girl is not sensible. Kyle stretched out his left hand, rubbed the short dark green hair, and pressed Lorna's cold face behind his back. The aurora emerged from where it touched, and Lorna, who had always been rebellious, buried her face in her hair, silent and silent. Kyle reminded Steve, "What I'm saying is, you two, there should be something that needs to be done right now, right?" Steve was stunned for a moment, and soon realized that the situation in New York City is at stake. The Winter Soldier, Project Insight, and Hydra spies from S.H.I.E.L.D. "I see. Natasha, let's go." Thinking of Bucky, Steve couldn't stay any longer, grabbed Natasha and left towards the basement. "Kyle, I will trouble you here." Steve dropped a sentence, and the footsteps were far away and could no longer be heard. Kyle shrugged and whispered inexplicably, "What's the trouble? It's just fighting." Behind him, Yutong smiled approvingly. "Indeed, it's all about fighting. There's no trouble in terms of combat. The Carl family is really ancestral on Earth. Especially now, with the combat power they have here, whoever comes will suffer. It's been a long time since I've fought against a Hydra organization. I hope they can have a longer memory this time. Let's go. Let's fight on the ground." Kyle put down his palm, strode like a meteor, and walked upstairs. Lorna smoothed her messy hair, the blush on her face dissipated, and followed Yutong's pace after a little while. The three of Kyle arrived at the roof of the third floor of the building and looked around. They could see fighter jets and armored vehicles not far away, forming an encirclement shrinking by flying and land travel, and turning on the headlights to conduct a carpet search. Slowly surround the old base where they are. Steve and Natasha took a step earlier, and now they have run away without a trace. With their skills, they should soon break through the encirclement of Hydra. Kyle thought for a while, then pulled out a few items from the card space and placed them on the ground of the roof. He snapped his fingers lightly, and a ray of flame jumped out from his fingertips, and shot them at the objects on the ground with precision. In the next moment, the lead rod of the item was ignited, and several miniature rockets rushed straight into the sky with a trailing sound. Boom! A few brilliant fireworks bloomed in the sky, and the night sky instantly brightened like day, briefly illuminating the old base below. What is attracting firepower and hatred? This is it. Under the fireworks, Kyle stood up against the night wind, squinting down and waiting for the enemy to arrive. Chapter 278, Playing Tricks of Gravitational Traction. Gorgeous fireworks bloomed in vain over the base, and the bursts of flames and rays of light were conspicuous, almost attracting the attention of people within a few miles. It should still be in the base. Hurry over there, we must not let them escape. The low-altitude hovering and scanning fighter planes, and the carpet-like searching armed vehicles, like sharks smelling blood, swarmed towards the old base in vain. It wasn't until they quickly moved away that the two people who were hiding in the shadow of the night stood up in the grass not far from the base. It's a bit dangerous, but it was just now. Natasha looked towards the base in surprise. Don't think about it, Kyle must have done it, Steve smiled wryly. In the face of this seemingly dangerous predicament, Kyle is probably the only one who lights up fireworks in a bad manner. Without thinking too much, taking advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Steve and Natasha continued to break through. Let's rush back to New York City first, but people from S.H.I.E.L.D. are still looking for us all over the street. We must find another reliable helper. Steve ran, and his eyes fell on Natasha beside him. Don't look at me. Everyone I know is from S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha waved her hand and said hesitantly, also, although the Carl family is considered, but judging by the attitude of the patriarch just now, he seems to be interested in New York City. The matter in the city is not very urgent. Before I figure out what he is thinking, I will not send help to the family, Steve asked curiously. The Carl family founded by Kyle. What kind of family power is this? The inside plan can endanger the safety of the world. Isn't this level enough for them to fight? You will know in the future. The members of the Carl family only obey the orders of the patriarch, and they do not issue orders from the patriarch. They are all local emperors of one side or an underground organization, Natasha bickered, unwilling to say more. The members of the Carl family all aim to evolve and live forever, which is difficult for ordinary people to understand. Except for the head of the family, Kyle, everyone has their own arrogance and temper. Except for a few members of the family, Natasha is not interested in the rest of the family. Steve nodded helplessly. That can't be helped. I can only rely on me, but I just recovered from the ice, and I don't know anyone. Halfway through his words, his eyes lit up slightly as if he suddenly thought of something correct. Steve remembered that in the military rehabilitation center, there was a black man who retired from the military. His previous occupation seemed to be a U.S. military pilot. Oh, Natasha nodded and asked casually, wait, how many days have you known him? 7 days. After the withdrawal of the non-combatants, a nighttime battle at the old base began. No, it should be said that a killing is more appropriate. The enemy's small fighter jets arrived first, and with the humming noise of their engines, they crossed the grid fence of the base, and rushed towards the sky above the roof of the building at high speed like a goshawk. Yutong was about to fight, so Kyle nudged Lorna and said in a deep voice, you don't have to worry about it, use your abilities to your heart's content. Let me see your true strength. Unprepared, Lorna was pushed to the front. Looking at the oncoming small fighter, she pursed her lips angrily and raised her hands coldly. Whoever is afraid of whom, in fact, since she went berserk in order to escape from the Hydra laboratory a few years ago, she has never fully used her ability. Until now, this moment. Lorna took a deep breath, her jewel-like eyes were solemn, her hair brushed her forehead without wind, and her palms glowed with a special effect of green mist when the ability was activated. Gravitational pull. For a brief moment, the small fighter plane, flying at a height of less than 30 meters, was suddenly subjected to abnormal gravity. The nose of the plane could not help but deflected a little, and it was about to hit the roof of the building. Kyle raised his eyes, and the small fighter plane continued to enlarge in his pupils. He couldn't help but speed up his tone and said, don't stop, just work harder. Lorna's face was slightly pale, her palms were rotating, and the green mist was turbulent and elegant in the air. Magnetic field control. It's like the last straw that broke the camel's back, and it's like, under the pressure of the original weight, it has turned dozens of times. Time and space seemed to freeze at this moment. The enemy fighter plane stopped in the air 10 meters in front of the building, as if it was delayed for half a second in a cartoon, and then fell heavily almost in free fall. The fighter plane crashed on the grass in front of the building, turning into a scorching fireball, and the blast wave went straight up to more than 10 meters, blowing Lorna's dark green hair wildly. Her beautiful and ruthless face, against a backdrop of the fire, was handsome and domineering, Even women would be swayed when they saw it. But for less than a second, it was difficult for Lorna to maintain her aloofness. Her pale face was ruddy, she clenched her fist excitedly, and looked at Kyle with anticipation and pride. How about it? Isn't it good? Ability alone to pull down a fighter jet, even though it is only flying at low altitude, is enough to shock ordinary people beyond recognition. Not bad, Kyle smiled slightly. Lorna, whose adrenaline was so high, suddenly let out a dissatisfied snort as if cold water had been poured on her. Kyle shook his head secretly. One sentence is not bad, it is a proper objective evaluation relative to ability. Gravitational traction and magnetic control, the two abilities are combined, and when played to the extreme, it is simply a semi-invincible field. Ripping off a small fighter jet in flight is just an off-the-ground use of capabilities. Kyle's ears moved slightly, and his extraordinary five senses sensed that the danger was approaching, so he thought about it and said, "Don't believe me? Let me see, what is the real application of abilities?" As soon as the words fell, the three of Kyle broke away from gravity, floated up, and flew away from the rooftop where they were next moment. The building below was violently bombarded, and the building collapsed into ruins in a devastating explosion. At a height of 20 meters, the three of them seemed to be in a space capsule, suspended and flying under the pull of various forces. "How did I fly? How did you do it?" Lorna exclaimed, and looked at Kyle with her beautiful eyes, but Yutong covered her mouth and smiled instead. "Look more clearly, isn't this the ability you possess?" Kyle laughed dumbfounded. Under his reminder, Lorna finally noticed that the familiar green mist was lingering between Kyle's fingers. There is traction from up, down, left, and right around them, causing them to leave the ground and maintain suspension, and thus achieve the effect of flying. This is gravitational traction. You can still play like this. Lorna was shocked, even ignoring why Kyle had her ability. The enemy troops who arrived at the base fired rocket launchers into the air again, and the shells rushed towards the three of them with tail sounds and flames. Not only can it be used in this way, but it can also be used in this way, Kyle said, and his index finger formed a sword shape, and tapped the menacing shells in the air. The gravitational force is distorted and disordered, the air freezes like a quagmire, and the speed of the rocket launcher in flight keeps slowing down until it barely stops half a meter in front of the fingertips. This half a meter is an insurmountable moat. Chapter 279 Yutong's exclusive domain. The tail flame of the rocket launcher is still spraying, but it can't break through an inch, and it stays motionless in the air half a meter away. Go back. Kyle tapped his finger again, and the green fog light effect wrapped around the two fingers, and the light concentrated on the fingertips to condense into dazzling green light. Under the precise and perfect control, the direction of the gravitational traction was immediately reversed, and the three rocket shells were slowly reversed, returning to the original path of the launch trajectory below. Boom, boom, boom. Three small fireballs exploded on the ground again, illuminating a corner of the base brightly, and many Hydra-armed teams that had just gathered from outside were stunned. It's a pity, it's only gravitational traction, the lowest branch of the force field series of abilities. It's almost the limit of ability to do this, Kyle sighed softly, retracting the merged fingers. Regardless of the slow flight in disguise, the creation of a certain gravitational repulsion field, and the gravitational level enough to rebound the rocket launcher, these powers seem to be very powerful, but in fact they are the maximum effect of the ability of gravitational traction to the limit. There is no room for further digging and exerting potential. With this gravitational traction, it is okay to deal with ordinary people. When encountering a Superman with a strengthened body like Black Widow Captain America, it can only be used as an auxiliary means to influence actions, and if you encounter Thor and the Hulk, you can only act as the same ability as coercion. After all, it is just a blue ability card. Reaching this level, it is already a top quality card in blue that is close to the rare level. But this performance was still enough to shock Lorna. She seemed to have opened the door to a new world, staring at Kyle with bright eyes. "Boss, you must teach me proficiency later." Kyle shook his head and said calmly, "In terms of the use of mutant abilities, Yutong, Logan and I are still a bit behind. They are the experts who have developed their abilities to perfection." "Who is Logan?" Lorna tilted her head. Kyle shrugged and said, "One of the elders of the Carl family is not on Earth right now." "Not on Earth?" Lorna was stunned. Obviously, she has not yet integrated into the Carl family. If she is familiar with some things in the family, she will not be surprised by some unnatural things now. "You'll know it later," Kyle pondered, looking down at the enemies who entered the base. and said to Yutong next to him, "Go, let Lorna see the full extent of your abilities." Yutong nodded her head lightly, her eyes were filled with silver light, and she flew down in a layer of faint fluorescent light, free from the gravitational control field in the air. "Yutong, she can fly." Lorna opened her mouth in surprise. She has a good relationship with Yutong, but she has never seen Yutong show her full ability, and she always thought it was just a mind-reading ability. Kyle explained, "Yutong's ability is mind control, divided according to potential level, between your gravitational traction and magnetic field control." Lorna's heart trembled slightly, her sense of superiority over her abilities was gone, and her eyes were tightly locked on Yutong's figure. Fall down. It wasn't until half a meter above the ground that Yutong's delicate body stopped at a low altitude and stood lightly on the concrete floor of the base square. The hem of the black long skirt fluttered slightly, and her broken silver eyes glanced ruthlessly and coldly at the surrounding enemies. She was alone, and she chose to land in the middle of the enemy army, like a coquettish black rose blooming in a unique place. Bulletproof armed vehicles with machine guns were parked densely around. The moment Yutong fell into the arena, tens of hundreds of armed soldiers aimed their guns at her in unison. "There are enemies, shoot and kill her." Experienced members of the Hydra organization will not be careless just because the other party is a beautiful woman. In just a short moment, they made decisive and stern countermeasures. Da-da-da. The muzzle of the gun was emitting blue flames, and the dense torrent of bullets formed a large net covering Xiang Yutong. Lorna, who saw this scene in the sky, couldn't help but exclaimed, and subconsciously wanted to reach out and use her ability to rescue. In the next moment, she stopped all movements, and her eyes were replaced by shock and horror. I saw Yutong raise her slender hands lightly, spreading her palms to both sides, forming a round air shield around the body surface. The rain of bullets, as long as they get within 1 meter of her, they all lose their momentum and are nailed into the air strangely. From all directions, a round of bullet shooting lasted for more than 10 seconds. It wasn't until the bullets and the clips were poured out that the armed personnel stopped in horror. The rain pupil in the center was surrounded by densely packed bullets, and the structure of the bullets nailed in the air formed a steel eggshell. Even if you don't have trypophobia, you will gasp when you see it. Your back will feel cold and your scalp will feel numb. "Is this a repulsion type ability?" Lorna in the air asked in surprise. "It's the same mind control. It's just to concentrate the mind to form an absolute mind control field within 1 meter of the body, and isolate any external offensive." When Kyle said this, he admired from the bottom of his heart. This is the power of Yutong, who has applied her abilities to the extreme. Within 1 meter, it is her exclusive domain, and even a god cannot set foot. When the rare blue ability card is applied to such a perfect state, even if it faces an enemy with a purple ability card, it still has the power to fight. In the base square, inside the bullet-wrapped body, the silver light in Yutong's eyes flourished. A super powerful idea was stimulated from the brain, and condensed outward into an invisible shock wave burst. Buzz! The bullets nailed in the air trembled, and then they were respectively engulfed by their thoughts, and exploded in fragments, shooting towards the pale-faced armed men around them. Whoa! In the front row, nearly, or so armed men fell down with a uniform groan, like a scene when a scythe harvests wheat. On the corpse, there were countless bullet holes, and thick blood was gushing out. They never dreamed that they would be killed by the bullets they shot. Yutong was unscathed, her beautiful eyes were silvery and cold, and her dark dress was not even stained with a trace of mud or blood. "This is Chitin, the Black Queen, one of the 3 giants of the Carl family, the Guardian." So strong, Lorna was amazed. Kyle nodded. This precise mind control is far more perfect than it was more than 60 years ago. It's a pity. It's just a rare blue mind control. If it's a rare purple mind control, Kyle thought for a while, but was stunned in vain. Looking at Yutong below, his eyes narrowed slightly and lost in thought. How did mutant abilities like mind control come about? It is a genetic variant, the first benign evolution of human beings. Since genes can evolve once, and superpowers can be obtained from non-existent ones, is it possible to evolve a second time based on the foundation? The second evolution, should it be called, the awakening of abilities? Is it possible for Yutong to awaken her ability? If her ability is awakened, will her ability card be advanced to the purple rank? Kyle thought to himself, his eyes flickering. Chapter 280, Mastering the Situation. Superpowers can be awakened and advanced. Regarding this point, Kyle can be sure. For example, the Protus gene has the word awakening, That is, ordinary Protoss can advance to a god king like Odin. It's a pity that in this world, there are very few mutants. There are no previous examples, and it is impossible to know the basic conditions for the awakening of abilities. But at this moment, seeing Yutong who had brought his ability to the extreme, Kyle suddenly realized a little bit more. If there is an awakening of ability, Yutong is undoubtedly infinitely close to the critical point of fullness. Just a tiny bit of inducement. But it's just half a step, invisible and intangible. It's not easy to break through the shackles of ability and awaken the superhuman gene for the second time. Kyle sighed in his heart, no longer thinking about this problem persistently, just planting a seed of hope in his heart. On the square of the base, under the dark night, the corpses fell on the ground in disorder, and the blood gathered and flowed into a scarlet stream. The long skirt is swaying, and Yutong is walking on tiptoe, walking forward in a catwalk, elegant and dangerous, like a beautiful and deadly jaguar on the grassland. She stepped on the blood and corpses, but her shoes and skirt were not stained at all. Everything, even the tiny dust in the air, was isolated by the wave of thoughts rippling in the void. 1 meter inside the body, the domain of ideas. Boom. Loud and muffled sniper gunshots came from a distance, and the next moment, the armor-piercing bullet with a spiral head had traveled half a kilometer, piercing the air and blasting towards the center of Yutong's eyebrows. This sniper bullet was so powerful that it finally stopped half a meter in front of Yutong, under the impediment of the mental barrier. But that's all, let alone half a meter, even a millimeter difference is a natural moat. But then, the second and third sniper shots sounded again. Yutong's eyes shone with silver light, he flicked his fingers lightly, the light of thoughts intertwined, and the first bullet turned into his own and bounced out. Boom. The bullet collided with a bullet, and then burst into fine metal fragments, and one of the fragments continued to move forward under the strong blessing of the mind. The fragments and the third bullet meet, bursting and shattering again. What? On the hill half a kilometer away, a top sniper raised his head in vain, his face full of horror and disbelief. I found you. A smile appeared on the corner of Yutong's mouth. At such a long distance, the ability of mind is beyond reach. She beckoned, and an enemy rifle on the ground fell into her hand. Before aiming, she fired 3 shots at the distant hill. Half a kilometer away, the sniper opened his eyes wide in horror, looked down at 2 more gun holes in his chest, lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Half a kilometer, 2 shots out of 3, not bad, Kyle said with a smile. If the enemy mistakenly thinks that Yutong is only good at fighting with a mind ability, she will undoubtedly die ugly. You must know that she has the ability card of a super agent, and she is almost omnipotent with a cognitive bonus. Yutong is Kyle's most perfect work so far, not one of them. After Yutong shot the sniper, he took out a magazine of bullets, and his mental ability was rampant. And the mental barrier was used as a protection to launch a fierce offensive by manipulating the bullets. Every time she took a step forward, several armed soldiers fell down, and more armed soldiers could only fight and push back, as if a lawnmower was harvesting life mercilessly mechanically. After such a long time, my subordinates and I have become stronger and stronger, but the Hydra organization is degrading. Kyle shook his head slightly, indifferently despising the one-sided armed personnel below. In the past, at any rate, there were laser weapons made of infinite energy, and the Red Skull could sustain the scene. Now Hydra is really alive and returning. Boss, can I go down and play? Lorna looked at the killing scene below and said eagerly. Playing? Do you think you're playing a game? Kyle looked at her and pondered, but it's good to have more actual combat. It's easiest to accept and master abilities in combat, but you have to bring the venom. As he spoke, Kyle waved his hand, and a ball of black liquid crashed into Lorna's arms. Venom? What? Lorna was startled, and hurriedly touched her chest with both hands, only to find that the liquid quickly melted into her clothes and body. The venom was in Lorna's mind, sighing and whispering, "Hey, I have to bring a baby again." Child? Who do you think is a child? Lorna raised her eyebrows in dissatisfaction, but she couldn't find the source of the voice after searching up and down. I say you. The dark wings spread out from the back, and Lorna exclaimed. Her hair was frantic, and she was carried by the venom and flew downward at a very high speed. Immediately, armed men raised their guns to aim and shoot. Lorna looked at the oncoming dense bullets and raised her hands in panic. Wait, I'm not mentally prepared yet. I know. The venom seemed to curl its lips, and a layer of dark cuticle appeared in time, covering Lorna's slender body. The bullets landed on the dark skin, and all of them bounced off ineffectively. Ignore the bullets and shoot. Go deep into the enemy group. Cool. Lorna's scarlet eyes lighted up slightly, and the ability of her hands finally took effect. Amidst a lingering green mist, the rifles of the nearby armed personnel came out one after another, floating above her head. The rifles moved closer together and formed a circle, with their muzzles slightly tilted towards the armed personnel. Goodbye. Lorna smiled coldly, took over all the metal guns, and fired in rotation. The unarmed Hydra personnel fell down in despair and wailing. The hang of venom, will it be too big, so easy to deal with? How can I exercise my ability? Kyle frowned, and stretched quickly. Although Lorna's ability is strong, she is not skilled enough, and she can micro-control her ability quickly and accurately. Like the sniper bullets aimed at Yutong just now, maybe one of them will kill Lorna now. Peaceful times allow it. You don't need to hone your abilities and skills on a murderous battlefield, so let's grow slowly in a safe greenhouse. Kyle looked away from the fierce but foregone battlefield below. 10 minutes later, Yutong and Lorna teamed up to wipe out the Hydra army besieging the base with a crushing force, leaving none behind. When Kyle fell back to the ground from the sky, Weiss just pushed away the bricks, drilled out of the basement buried in the ruins, and flew back in a disheveled manner. How? Kyle asked it. Weiss reported. Hydra's most confidential information has been destroyed, but Hydra has hidden bases around the world, a total of 35, and I have all the information. Any news about my eldest sister and second brother? Lorna, who came over, hurriedly asked. Wissy shook his head and replied, no, their existence belongs to Hydra's top secret files. Okay, Lorna bit her lower lip lightly. Tonight's harvest is very good. Kyle couldn't help laughing. More than good. With information on the location of nearly all the bases of the Hydra organization, the situation is already very clear. Time, completely on their side. Chapter 281 Countdown to 1 days. At this time, Yutong stepped back, holding an enemy satellite communicator in his hand, with a small green light flashing on it. Obviously someone wanted to get in touch with his side. Boss, this is the communicator on the enemy commander. Yutong handed over the communicator. Kyle took it with one hand, and connected directly without thinking. The man on the other side of the communicator immediately growled impatiently after the communication was connected. What are you doing? You've been dawdling? Has Steve Rogers solved it for me? Kyle looked around. Around the three of them, all the armed personnel had become corpses lying on the ground. He didn't hear the answering voice. The man keenly sensed that something was wrong, and said in a deep voice, who are you? Who answered the phone? The corner of Kyle's mouth raised, and he said indifferently to the communicator, there is still 1 day. As soon as he finished speaking, he exerted a slight force on his hand, and the communicator flickered and burst into pieces. Let's go. Go back first. Kyle patted off the fragment in his hand and gave the next instruction. The grievances with the Hydra organization that have run through the century are also coming to an end in New York. New York, next to the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D., in a duplex luxury villa. In the dead of night, the hall on the third floor was not turned on. Under the dim small tile lamp, there were only two men sitting on the sofa facing each other. One of them was a middle-aged man with neat blonde hair, a suit and leather shoes, and a calm and sophisticated aura of being in a high position. But at this moment, a drop of cold sweat emerged from his forehead, slipped across his face, and dripped from his chin onto the expensive trousers. Pierce put down the communicator in a daze. His face was bloodless pale, his brows were furrowed, and he was frantically thinking. The young man's voice just now, you can't hear it wrong, it must be him, the number one mortal enemy of the Hydra organization. Since he is there, it means that the hundreds of armed legions I sent to deal with Captain Steve have been destroyed. Pierce's heart was bleeding, and at the same time, fear filled his body spontaneously. In the end he said that there is 1 more day. What does that mean? Could it be that he knows all this, and he will make a move in 1 day, directly and simply stated that he will do it in a day, and the pressure on people is still endless? Since he is a peace symbol, that's enough. Nick Fury is dead, and that man probably knows my true identity. Things are irreversible. When Pierce was anxiously thinking about countermeasures, the other man sitting on the sofa directly opposite him was silent. The man has disheveled hair and is wearing a long-sleeved leather jacket. The entire mechanical arm in his left hand is slightly contrasted by the metallic light, and there is a dark red 5-pointed star logo on his arm. Pierce seemed to think of something, staring at the silent man, and asked, by the way, Winter Soldier, you must answer me exactly. If you face Kyle, What are your chances of winning, K.L.? Hearing this name, the Winter Soldier raised his head, and his dead and cold eyes fluctuated a little. After a long silence, the Winter Soldier said indifferently, I have no chance of winning against him, really. Pierce's face was calm instead. And he should have been surprised if the Winter Soldier said he could block the peace symbol. The Winter Soldier can only be used to deal with Steve at most, and an enemy of Kyle's level is far from enough by more or less ordinary means. The time is too tight. The helicopter carrier must be sent to the sky before tomorrow morning. As for Kyle, Pierce confirmed this idea. Who? The Winter Soldier twitched his ears, stood up in vain, and cast his cold eyes at the hall door. At some point, a short person who is only 1 meter tall was wearing a black cloak and couldn't see his body and face clearly. He just stood at the door and looked at them quietly. Pierce said coldly, What? Solve it. Without his orders, the Winter Soldier had already set off ahead of time, and crossed about 10 meters at a superhuman speed. He jumped directly above the dwarf, and smashed down with a clenched mechanical left fist. Boom. The fist landed on the smooth floor of the hall, and under the impact of several tons, the tiles instantly cracked and collapsed like spider webs. The Winter Soldier's eyes froze, and he missed the attack, and he didn't see the other party's dodging movements or traces at all. The moment before the fist landed on the dwarf disappeared without warning. Behind you, Pierce's surprised voice sounded. The Winter Soldier heard that he was still in the air, so he supported the ground with his original left fist, twisted his waist forcefully, and swept one leg backward like lightning. With his kick, even the car would fly a few meters away. Call out. In the nick of time, the cloaked dwarf disappeared out of thin air, and the Winter Soldier's attack fell through again. Before Pierce could react, he saw only a flash of black shadow, and the cloaked dwarf was sitting on the sofa in front of him. If you make another move, I'm going to kill this guy. The cloaked dwarf made an old hoarse voice and pointed at Pierce. Naturally, the Winter Soldier would not listen to the threat, and was about to rush forward, but Pierce hurriedly waved his hand to stop him. Winter Soldier, stop. The Winter Soldier paused stiffly, standing like a statue in the hall. Pierce looked at the cloaked dwarf, and asked with respect and fear, This old gentleman, don't talk nonsense, you just need to know that I'm here to help you. The cloaked dwarf interrupted him. Help me. Pierce was a little confused. The cloaked dwarf said very easily, Aren't you going to deal with the peace symbol tomorrow? I'll stop him for you. You? Stop the peace symbol? Pierce took a deep breath, and asked suspiciously but excitedly, I don't know what to call you. The cloaked dwarf said seriously, Me? Call me little ancestor. DeHale Building, the underground conference hall. A temporary and secret meeting is being held here, organized by Kyle, and the invited participants include Hulk Banner, Iron Man Tony, Colonel Ross, and General Thunderbolt. Apart from the Carl family, this is the most reliable and powerful outsider that Kyle can summon so far. Kyle tapped his finger on the table and said calmly, Weiss has already told you about the specific matters one by one just now, and the relevant information will be sent to you tomorrow morning. You just need to complete the tasks you are responsible for, Tony said with emotion. Godfather, you are exaggerating, it's indeed a big deal. Ross thought deeply, looked at General Perrick, and said in a deep thought, Our military will give the greatest help, but after all, it is to hide things from the congressman and the president. It is obviously wrong to want to launch a large-scale army. Impossible. General Thunderbolt nodded. You just need to provide assistance, you don't need your army as the main force. Kyle smiled softly. Then who can be the main force? Ross asked curiously. Aren't I? Bruce pointed to his nose. The crowd was speechless. It's true that Hulk alone can outmaneuver an elite army, it's just too easy to get out of hand. Don't worry, I naturally have the main force, Kyle said calmly and firmly. After tomorrow, the century-old foundation of the Hydra organization will be wiped from the earth, and it will never turn around again. Chapter 282 Earth Cleanup Plan. There is a saying that before welcoming guests or meeting enemies, clean up your house first. Same thing now. The Hydra organization is not a big threat, but it jumps out from time to make trouble, like a mouse dropping in porridge, which makes people feel disgusted. Kyle decided that if he didn't make a move, it would be fine, and if he made a move, he would break it with one blow, severely injuring and erasing the foundation of the Hydra organization. This plan, or secretly plotting it, is simply called the Earth Cleanup Plan. The next day, in the morning, the urban area of New York City is as usual, In the steel jungle formed by high-rise buildings, people are constantly flowing, busy, bustling and lively. Today is another day of peace. Since the opening of the speeches of heroes and aliens, countless citizens have habitually sighed and hurriedly entered their hard-working and fast-paced day's work. Of course, this is only the tranquility and harmony on the surface. At this time, behind the city, where the eyes of the public cannot reach, there are undercurrents of several forces surging in the area of a veterans service office, in the main hall of a duplex villa. Crack, with a slight rotation of the mechanical gear teeth, the rocket-shaped backpack full of technological texture splits, and a pair of mechanical wings with dark metallic luster flutters out. Each high-tech precision hang glider is a full 2 meters long. A black youth around 35 years old, wearing a gray uniform and electronic sunglasses, raised his hands and turned around in a circle, showing his high-tech equipment to the two people next to him. Steve, who was sitting on the chair, couldn't help blinking his eyes and asked, "Well, you said before that you were an injured and retired pilot. I am indeed a pilot and an airborne soldier, but I have carried out the Falcon Confidential plan, and I am considered half an elite agent," Sam Wilson explained in a deep voice. Natasha didn't struggle so much, and said with a charming smile, "It doesn't matter what vulture or falcon, as long as it can kill the enemy. Now that we have more combat power, we will increase our chances of winning." Steve acknowledged this, and was about to continue to say something, when the doorbell of the villa rang suddenly. The expressions of the three people in the hall changed slightly. They looked at each other silently, and even the atmosphere in the room became tense for a moment. "I didn't invite guests today, and I don't have any friends on weekdays," Sam gestured and communicated in sign language. The mechanical wings did not retract, and he was ready to start flying at any time. Steve took a few steps forward silently, and took the colorful shield in his hand from the side of the sofa. Natasha also kept her composure, bent over and bowed, reached out to touch the holster on her calf, and pulled out the pistol while holding the cold and small handle. Their bodies are tense and their spirits are vigilant, and they are about to take the lead in launching an offensive breakthrough. "It's me," as if guessing the high tension of the three people in the room, a calm and powerful voice sounded outside the door. Sam didn't know why. Steve, who quickly recognized the voice, let out a sigh of relief, and Natasha put the pistol back, and walked quickly to open the door. Looking at the people coming from outside the door, Sam trembled all over. Exclaiming with difficulty concealing his excitement, "Oh, my God, a living symbol of peace, Birdman." Kyle looked at him with a slightly stunned expression on his face. "You are my ultimate idol, can you sign it?" Sam danced and fumbled for the uniform, but couldn't find anything, and finally had a flash of inspiration, and slapped the mechanical wings on his back. "Please sign here." "Sam, you are enough. Last time you said that the idol is me." Steve glanced at him angrily, put down his shield, and looked at Kyle with a questioning look in his eyes. "How is the situation now?" "It's all under control," Kyle said with a light smile, sitting on the sofa by himself, looking at Sam and his mechanical metal wings a little. Another hero supported by technology, Falcon. Sure enough, after the turmoil of Hydra lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. was advanced, he also officially embarked on his own life path because of Steve's door-to-door help. Under control, what does that mean? Steve pressed. "I was so busy trying to save the world, worrying about this and that, but now I'm fine, and I just said small things." Kyle asked back, "You should know the real purpose of the Inside Plan, right?" "Of course," Steve nodded, and said truthfully, "Not long ago, we captured a Hydra dogleg and learned the truth from him. Hydra wanted to use the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. to control 3. The helicopter carrier goes to the sky and becomes their exclusive killing weapon." He was only halfway through, looking at Kyle's calm expression. He suddenly said, "Wait, you already knew this?" Kyle nodded slightly, and said in an unquestionable tone, "Steve, after the aircraft carrier goes to the sky, you will bring a smart chip to it to prevent or delay their linkage." "No problem." Steve had no doubts about him, and he simply agreed, and asked curiously, "But what are you going to do?" "I'm going to the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters building," Kyle replied indifferently, and several people in the hall suddenly felt a strange chill rushing up their backs. What does it mean to go to today's S.H.I.E.L.D. alone? No one stopped Kyle, and no one could stop his actions. Even Fury only begged for a delay of 2 days. What about the others? Natasha was surprised. Only then did she notice that Yutong and the newly joined Lorna were not following Kyle now. You know, Yutong almost never leaves Kyle's private trips, unless there are special circumstances. They have equally important things to do. As Kyle said, he picked a fresh grape from the fruit plate on the table, threw it into his mouth and chewed it slightly. "It tastes good. Do you want to eat it, and then act after eating?" Steve smiled wryly. The few people now have no intention of eating grapes. In New York to come, no matter what, there will be bloody and smoky disputes unfolding. "Eat slowly, we're going first." Steve had already put on the tight battle suit, and now he put the adamant shield on the back, and after putting on the helmet with half a mask, he returned to his previous battle attire during World War II. Exactly the same, nothing has changed. Good momentum. Kyle was a little bored. The Hydra organization is nothing more than it has yet reached the point where it deserves your seriousness. Steve and the others put on their equipment, opened the door and were about to leave. Suddenly their bodies stopped at the door, and they raised their heads and stared blankly at the distant sky. There are 3 huge island-like steel fortresses, seemingly ignoring the gravity of the levitation. Driven by the engine, they are slowly rising towards the blue sky, and they have risen to a height of about, meters by visual estimation. "Kyle, the aircraft carrier is going to the sky," Steve called out hastily, and took the 2 of them without hesitation, leaving the villa and heading straight for the aircraft carrier. In the lobby of the villa. 2 hours faster than expected. "Can't wait," Kyle chuckled and said to Weese's deformed electronic watch on his wrist, "Notify everyone, you can act according to the original plan." Chapter 283. One person breaks into S.H.I.E.L.D. This day, near noon, people in the New York area raised their heads in shock, and saw 3 huge metal fortresses, constantly floating towards the vast blue sky, casting a large shadow that covered the sky and the sun. Doubt, depression, fear and other emotions caused the vehicles and pedestrians in the streets to stop, and they watched the 3 steel aircraft carriers form a triangle at high altitude. On the fast-lane road leading directly to the city, a black Ford carrying Steve and others was fully powered, and approached at a high speed directly under the aircraft carrier in the sky ahead. "Sam, drive faster," Steve urged, his left hand still clutching a bald-headed man in a suit with silver-rimmed glasses. The man in the suit dared not move in the hands of Captain America, and surrounded by the other 2. Under the power that was absolutely superior, there was not even a escape rate. Sitting on the car seat, cold sweat broke out on his forehead, his face was pale, and he said in a submissive manner, "Brothers, I've said everything I need to say. Where are you taking me now?" Steve didn't hide anything, and said bluntly, "It's very simple. None of us have permission to enter the interior of the aircraft carrier. We must borrow your iris and fingerprints to pass through the intelligence system." The corner of the man's mouth twitched slightly, his face turned paler and paler, and he said in a hopeless manner, "Are you devils? Then Pierce will kill me." The current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra spy, Alexander Pierce. Steve couldn't help laughing, and Natasha and Sam in the front seat also smiled. "Don't worry, he probably can't even take care of himself." "It's dangerous." The alarm bell in Steve's heart rang loudly. He sank down suddenly, and by the way, he pushed the man in the suit down hard with his left hand. But it's still half a beat too late. Puff. The left glass window shattered like an explosion, and then, the man in the suit's head burst open from the outside to the inside like a watermelon, splashing red, white and white liquid everywhere in the car. "It's a sniper bullet." Steve took the lead in confirming this, moved his hand away from the waist of the headless corpse, and raised the shield on the back with the other hand to block the direction of the bullet. Just after finishing this action, a swarm of dense rifle bullets, a few hitting the outer shell of the car body, more tinkling and falling on the shield, and the sunken and useless ones fell freely. Until the bullet attack stopped, before Steve had time to breathe a sigh of relief, Natasha on the co-pilot exclaimed, "Be careful, there are also ahead." As if following her warning, the Ford car suddenly trembled violently, with a huge rearward inertia, and the speed of the car changed from hundreds of kilometers per hour to 0 in a few seconds. The moment the car hit something and stopped, Steve leaned his back on the back seat of the car, and kicked his feet towards the sunroof of the car, and the entire sunroof was damaged and flew out. He pressed the car seat with one hand, and pushed hard with his palm, and his tall body jumped out of the car window upside down. Coming out of the car, Steve turned over and stood firmly on the roof of the Ford. His sharp eyes glanced forward, and his tenacious and fearless mind immediately set off waves. It was a military green Jeep that collided with a Ford, and the fronts of both vehicles had been smashed into slag. But this is not the point. The point is that there is also a young man in his 30s standing on the roof of the Jeep. The young man was wearing a cloth mask, with golden dirty curly hair covering his head and face, revealing a pair of cold and indifferent eyes. He was wearing a uniform jacket and combat boots, his mechanical metal left arm was particularly eye-catching, and he was holding an old-fashioned AK-47 in both hands. "It's you, there's nothing wrong. Bucky." Steve took a deep breath, with excitement on his face. Since they separated at the end of World War II, both of them have experienced death, spanning more than half a century, and now they finally meet again. Could it be that the two people who once fought side by side and went through life and death are now confronting each other with different positions? Is this God joking? Steve let out more breath and was about to step forward. A familiar man called out the familiar name Bucky. In the Winter Soldier's dehumanized heart and brain thinking full of mission instructions, in the darkness that has been silent for a long time, there are finally a little sparkling memory ripples. However, it quickly faded away. The Winter Soldier had no expression on his face. He mechanically raised the AK-47 with both hands, pulled the trigger, and shot at his former comrade-in-arms Steve, who was less than 5 meters in front of him. SHIELD Headquarters Building. Although the 3 helicopter carriers took off from here, after rising continuously, they gradually deviated from the trajectory and headed towards the city center. They are now separated from the surface of the headquarters building by a distance of several thousand meters. At this moment, a silver-haired young man in casual clothes, with his hands in his pockets, came to the main entrance like a bored stroll. The silver-haired young man raised his eyes, looked around, looked at the sculptured stone statues beside the door holding a shield and a sword respectively, and shook his head ironically. He walked a few steps forward and arrived at the closed main entrance. Infrared automatic detection and recognition of faces and irises. Then, the mechanical notification beeped. "This user does not have permission to enter the headquarters. Please leave immediately." "Okay," Kyle whispered to himself, "even my permissions have been deleted, and all my own things are really used by others. However, Weezy is not around for the time being, and this time he only brought a venom. Since this is the case, there is nothing to feel bad about." Kyle raised his left hand, and the black liquid gushed out like a boil, turning into a cuticle shell to cover the entire arm. 3 sharp dark blades protruded from the bones of the fingers at the end of the fist, and the tips quietly touched the 3-centimeter thick tempered glass protective door. The SHIELD Headquarters Building, located near the top floor of the director's office. Pierce stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking at the far end of his line of sight. The 3 aircraft carriers were still rising steadily, prompting his fists to be clenched and loosened at times, and his palms were already clenched with sweat. To subvert all the countries and forces on the earth, Hydra dominates and changes the world, and now it is only the last step. The Hydra organization has been dormant and tolerant for many years, and all the hard work and energy have been devoted to the fear of the world at this moment. So now, Pierce was expecting and nervous. At this moment when his body and mind were extremely tense, the phone on the desk in the office suddenly rang. Pierce stepped forward quickly, seeing that it was the headquarters number downstairs. He picked up the microphone and said in a deep voice, "What's the matter, Director?" And, the female receptionist's words were intermittent, and the communication signal was good. It was fear that made her tongue and teeth tremble uncomfortably. An ominous premonition filled Pierce's heart, and he shouted, "What? Make it clear." Frightened, the female receptionist finally uttered a complete sentence. "Here comes the symbol of peace." "What?" Pierce gasped. His round and rosy face turned pale, and he almost sat down on the office chair. What he was most worried about finally happened. The lobby on the first floor of SHIELD at this time. The tempered glass protective door was closed as before, but there was a triangular gap in the middle that could accommodate 3 people. The section of the gap was as smooth as a mirror, and the cut triangular glass lay down on the floor. Treating the triangular glass as an ordinary carpet, Kyle put away the dark claws, surrounded by a lot of agents in suits and leather shoes, and more armed military security approached here. "I'm getting better soon, I'll make it up in 2 days." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284. Who can resist it? SHIELD Headquarters, lobby on the first floor. Due to the forcible intrusion that destroyed the protective door, the sirens started to sound from the ceiling and walls everywhere, and the elite agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and special military security gathered densely towards the door. Among them, many people are equipped with firearms and are neatly armed, and some high-tech equipment such as high-shock pistols and gravity handcuffs are in hand. But as soon as they arrived at the door, they stopped in unison, their expressions changed drastically to shock and doubt, and they looked at the so-called intruder with cold sweat dripping from their foreheads. There is only one person on the other side, but it is better than thousands of legions. Symbol of peace, Kyle. How could it be him? Most of the people in the hall held their breath, just like a subordinate who sees his boss, or a cat who sees a liger, and dare not make a sound. The director of S.H.I.E.L.D. had a previous order. The aircraft carrier of the Insight plan is about to start. Today, anyone who invades the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters will be killed. If they can't be killed, they will delay time and wait for the arrival of the New York Army. But if the intruder is the man in front of him, who can resist it? Countless agents groaned and cursed in their hearts, except for some Hydra spies who had other hidden identities, but they also lowered their heads weakly to hide their fear. Kyle looked around for a week, his golden pupils shone with majesty, and no one on the field dared to look at him. Kyle asked calmly, "Why are you going to stop me?" The words were equally plain, but like a thunderbolt, it exploded in the hall on the first floor. No one dared to respond, only the siren in the hall was still screaming anxiously. The head of the S.H.I.E.L.D. commander was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He walked from the back of the crowd to the front, wiped the cold sweat on his forehead with his sleeves in his suit, bent down and said in a compliment, "Dear Mr. Kyle, among them is there some misunderstanding?" "Misunderstanding?" Kyle smiled lightly and asked, "When will I not be able to enter the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters at will? How can you be random? Even the main entrance has been demolished." Naturally, the minister didn't dare to say it clearly. He squeezed out a smile, and opened his mouth with an excuse. "Misunderstanding? This must be a misunderstanding. Today, a secret project of S.H.I.E.L.D. was launched, so it entered the state of defensive alert in advance, and everyone is not allowed in and out of the headquarters building." "Whose order is this?" Kyle asked again. "The current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Alexander Pierce," the minister answered truthfully, with a lot of confidence. Kyle's face turned cold, and he said, "I'm going to see him and ask him face to face. Since when did S.H.I.E.L.D. change its name to Alexander? It's fine if you don't give face." The undisguised sending hostility made everyone's face change, including the minister. Many S.H.I.E.L.D. agents sensed that something was wrong, and stepped aside to watch silently. The things that happened recently are really weird and suspicious. The former director Nick Fury rebelled and died. The deputy director Natasha resigned and investigated. Captain America Steve was wanted at large, and the Insight plan to benefit the future of society was launched in advance, etc. Some people have already had doubts in their hearts, because they did not dare to resist the orders of their superiors, until now Kyle came to the door alone, which connected a series of doubts in series. Something is wrong, something big is happening inside S.H.I.E.L.D. The minister seemed to be under great pressure, and the lining of his suit was soaked in cold sweat. He gritted his teeth and said, "Now the director has something to do. Can you change another day?" Snapped. The black shadow flashed forward, and the minister's body flew upside down. There was a depression of at least 5 centimeters in his chest, but even the inner bones and lungs were shattered in an instant. His eyes were full of disbelief, with regret, resentment, and the loss of life as his consciousness dissipated. Boom. The human body was thrown upwards, passing over the heads of countless agents, and finally smashed hard onto the snow-white wall, turning into a mass of bloody mud wrapped in expensive suits. On the spot where the minister was standing, Kyle appeared and stood there, maintaining his slapping motion indifferently. After the trembling eyes of the agent came over, he casually withdrew his left palm. The director of S.H.I.E.L.D., second only to the deputy director, was swept to death like a fly in the headquarters building. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in the lobby are elite talents from all over the world, and they have never seen any scene. But now, their scalps were all numb, and their bodies and minds were dominated by fear, making it difficult to move. What is gore? What is brutality? What is demon? This is half a century of precipitation. Time is too long. If the goshawk sleeps for too long, people will doubt the sharpness of its claws. In addition, the title of peace symbol, which is biased towards gentleness and tenderness, is too big, so many people in the new era have forgotten it. They forgot that Kyle once represented the power and conquest of the country. He was originally famous for organizing thousands of people to kill the enemy with Nasui and Hydra. He was the meat grinder that dominated the battlefield in World War II and the feared demon butcher that the enemy country heard of. They also forgot that Kyle has always been unreasonable with others. The strong ones wait for the card to be drawn, and the weak ones are directly killed. And the big fist is the absolute last word. Whoever stops me is a Hydra spy, and you have seen the end, Kyle said, walking into the hall. Every time he took a step, the surrounding agents all took a step back. Even real Hydra spies would not be sent to death meaninglessly now. Until, the agents were blocked in front of the elevator, unable to retreat. Upstairs, the chief's office. Pierce sat slumped on the chair, hung up the phone with a busy signal again. His face was pale and bloodless. He made 3 phone calls successively, to the U.S. military, the U.S. Congressman's office, and the UN committee. This is a commonly used means of taking advantage of the situation. When faced with a situation that S.H.I.E.L.D. cannot handle, the other forces are brought together to exert pressure. This tactic has been ineffective for more than, years. Even Director Fury, Captain America, etc. have to suffer a lot for this, and they are pursued and wanted on unwarranted charges. Until today, met Kyle. Let him be in a high position, let him hold the military power, let him be powerful. When faced with the young people who invaded from the main gate, all these methods will be ineffective and replaced by a deep sense of powerlessness. I have already stood on a certain peak, but he is at the end of the starry sky above the peak. Pierce sighed. The phone on the table rang, and he subconsciously picked up the receiver. Bureau Chief. We can't stop it. Listening to the terrified words of the correspondent downstairs, Pierce grabbed the microphone with his fingers hard, his bones turned white, and said wearily, I see, don't stop him, let him come up, okay? The correspondent was relieved and hung up the phone. With a snap, Pierce threw the microphone on the table, stood up from the leather office chair, and wandered impatiently in the hall like an ant in a hot pot. This lasted 5 seconds. Wait, I haven't lost yet. Pierce raised his head abruptly, and looked out of the French window with bloodshot eyes, which was still rising and moving away, becoming a helicopter carrier with 3 small squares in the sky. The inside plan, the human elite, and the Hydra plan to exclude dissidents are still in progress. As long as the aircraft carrier is still there, I will not lose all. What's more, even if I fail this time and fall down, there will still be thousands of Hydra in the future. Thinking of this, Pierce regained his composure, straightened his clothes, returned to the office chair and sat down. At this time, in the corridor outside the door, footsteps sounded from far to near. A stern look flashed in Pierce's eyes. As long as you are forced to take action in this battle, I will make a fortune in blood. Long live Hydra. Resume the double update tomorrow, and then make up the update. Chapter 285 The Love and Killing Between Captain America and the Winter Soldier. S.H.I.E.L.D. Headquarters Building, Director's Office. Kyle opened the door and walked into the room, followed his gaze, and when he saw Pierce sitting on the office chair, he couldn't help but smiled and said, I thought you would choose to run away. It's fine. Why did I run away? Pierce responded with a forced smile, cursing inwardly. If he could escape, he would have escaped long ago, but in this situation, fleeing will only accelerate Hydra's defeat. Anyone can escape, but he can't. Once he falls, he will undoubtedly confirm his identity as a Hydra spy, and the rest of the Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. will also be wiped out. Pierce is biting the bullet now. It seems that you have already realized that you must die. Kyle chuckled, walked to the office chair, opened the chair and sat down politely, as if he was the master here. The two looked at each other face to face. This was the first time they met, and it might be the last time. Pierce tried to say with emotion, symbol of peace, Kyle. I grew up listening to your hero's name and historical biography. I just found out about you last night. It was Nick Fury who told me. Kyle nodded, telling the truth. When Pierce heard the first half of the sentence, a gleam of shame and anger welled up in his eyes, and when he heard the second half of the sentence, his eyelids jumped and widened in surprise. That's right, Fury isn't dead yet. What happened yesterday just made you let your guard down a little bit, Kyle continued, and at the end, he added a knife. I didn't expect you to be really fooled, and the target was changed from him to Steve. Pierce felt that from the moment they met and talked, his strength and IQ had been humiliated by the other party, but he didn't dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction on his bright face, and there was still a trace of luck in his heart and asked, how much do you know? Kyle spread his hands and said, not much, just the actual effect of the inside plan, Hydra's occupation of the assimilated S.H.I.E.L.D., and fury being attacked by the Winter Soldier you send. When Pierce heard this, he felt dizzy and almost fell on the office chair. That's not much, that's almost all, okay? Knowing that his identity had been exposed, Pierce restrained his humility and flattery on his face, stared at Kyle angrily, and said with a sneer, "So, did you come here on purpose to deal with me? You think too highly of yourself." Kyle couldn't help laughing, raised a finger, shook it and said calmly, "I heard that there is a clown who is proud of himself here. I'll come over to watch the show and take his life. By the way, killing someone is said so lightly, but it is undoubtedly a decree of death that cannot be changed." Pierce's face was gloomy and uncertain. Complex emotions such as anger, fear, and powerlessness flashed past, and then he raised his head and laughed loudly. "You think you are sure to win, but I am sure to lose, so you come here to humiliate me?" Kyle didn't respond, and Pierce, who was tolerant for a long time, was even more inspired by the look in his eyes watching the clown struggle. "You are so arrogant." Pierce no longer suppressed his emotions, patted the table with his palm, and said loudly, "I know, you must let Captain America and the others rush to the helicopter carrier, but you don't know, I sent the Winter Soldier in advance, let him lead people guard over there." He paused, and said meaningfully, "I really don't have many cards in my hand. But using the card of Winter Soldier, it happens to be able to severely suppress the card you played." Kyle nodded, unexpectedly agreeing with his strategic analysis. The Winter Soldier and the US team, the two love each other and kill each other, and the fetters are entangled. To deal with the US team, it is right to send the Winter Soldier, and the guarantee is also, which is enough to delay for a long time. It's a pity. As you said, I have a lot of cards in my hand, so I played more than the Captain America card. Kyle smiled lightly. Stopping the helicopter carrier is a big deal. How could he put all the burden on it? Steve's shoulders. The so-called control of the battle situation means having a suppressive force that is above the enemy, and is sufficient to deal with all unexpected factors that occur during the process. What did you say? Pierce opened his mouth in disbelief. At this time, on the highway near the viaduct, Steve and his group were scattered, hiding behind abandoned cars on the road, avoiding the suppression of bullets from the Hydra-armed squad. Steve and Sam, both on the side of the same car, spying on the enemy's approach. Sam glanced at the Winter Soldier holding a gun more than 10 meters away, and asked in surprise, "Captain, you were talking to the leader just now. Do you know him? He was my former comrade in arms and friend during World War II. Now he should be brainwashed and controlled by the Hydra organization," Steve said with a complicated face. "I hope he can see that you are an old friend from the past, and be gentle," Sam complained. Just when he saw the new weapon in the hands of the Winter Soldier, the mechanical metal wings activated urgently, and his face changed drastically. The growl reminded, "Get out of the way." Before he finished speaking, he flew into the sky to escape. In the next moment, a high-explosive bazooka was launched from the hands of the Winter Soldier, and the trailing flame bombarded the car in place, and the car immediately exploded into a huge burning fireball. Steve reacted very quickly, rolled back on the spot, and blocked the adamant shield in front of him. The fire waves and debris impacted the shield and separated it to the two sides. Before he could catch his breath, the second rocket launcher came one after another and exploded on the shield. Holding the shield in his hand, Steve bounced off under the impact of the explosion, crossed a parabola of more than 10 meters, and fell from the viaduct without change. "I'm going, so ruthless. Is this really a comrade in arms?" Sam in the air was speechless when he saw this scene, and wanted to find a way to deal with it. A shuttle of bullets hit with precision, and Sam evaded vigorously, but left a safe distance in the air helplessly. In the air, facing a sharpshooter like the enemy is like a living target. The Winter Soldier had no expression on his face, his stern gaze was withdrawn from the air. He threw away the rifle with all the magazines empty, and took Gatling, who was carried by the two armed men on the side with great difficulty. Holding the handle in one hand and the lower end of the gun barrel in the other, the Winter Soldier jumped off the viaduct in a murderous spirit, chasing and killing Steve like a war-killing machine. Call out. The round shield rotated lightly and swiftly, turned slightly like a dart, and hit the back of the Winter Soldier's head. The Winter Soldier's ears twitched slightly, and he kept holding Gatling with one hand, and the mechanical left arm slammed back, and the round shield turned and returned according to the original trajectory. Steve's tall figure jumped out, caught a buckler in the air, put it on his arm, and said loudly, "Bucky, have you really forgotten me? What responded to him was a barrage of bullets that formed a torrent of bullets, sweeping across the concrete floor, leaving behind a terrifying scene of potholes. With a shield erected in front of him, all the bullets bounced off. Steve faced the fiery Gatling like this, advancing instead of retreating. Second update, probably tomorrow morning. Chapter 286. We seize a reliable rescue. The Winter Soldier had a grim face, carrying a heavy steel Gatling in his hand, ignoring the huge rear booster, and fired all the bullets forward. Adamant shield blocks all the way. Steve made a breakthrough to shorten the distance, approached, the Winter Soldier swung Gatling, and threw it at the top of the opponent's head from top to bottom. Kaka. Lifting the shield up, Gatling immediately flew out in a deflected manner. But in doing so, Steve exposed his undefended belly. The Winter Soldier's eyes were sharp, and he didn't miss this opportunity. The mechanical arm showed inhuman explosive power, and his fist blasted out like a cannonball. Quick, accurate, ruthless. Steve groaned in pain, his abdomen was wounded, he flew back upside down with his shield on, fell to the ground and tumbled 10 meters away. The Winter Soldier's body has undergone long-term transformation, and his physique is not inferior to that of a super soldier. The most important thing is the mechanical left arm, which can be used as the main weapon to hit tons of impact at will. This is still Captain America, or an ordinary person, who is afraid that he will die if he gets punched. Despite this, Steve was still sweating coldly on his forehead, covering his painful abdomen with one hand, and trying to get up with a shield in the other. But once the Winter Soldier makes a move, he won't show mercy. There was a whistling sound in his ears. Steve didn't care to get up, he fell down and continued to roll backwards vigorously. As soon as he made this action, the Winter Soldier jumped down from the sky, his leather boots trampled hard on the spot where he was originally, his mechanical left arm shone coldly in the sun, and his clenched left fist chased forward and fell down. Boom. Steve kept rolling and dodging, the metal left fist brushed past his body, and landed on the hard concrete floor specially made by Gongguang, instantly bursting into a spider-web-shaped crack with a diameter of 1 meter. It's dangerous, Steve gritted his teeth, tumbling and throwing the buckler out of the distance. The shield whirled and whizzed through the air, heading straight for the Winter Soldier's neck. The Winter Soldier raised his eyes coldly, his left arm, which was clenched and pressed to the ground one moment, was lifted up like lightning the next moment, and his reaction nerves far surpassed other slaps on the oncoming shield. The shield hummed, and this time it didn't return the same way, it flew obliquely to the side, and plunged into the compartment of an abandoned bus on the side of the road. Steve lost his shield, and finally gained some breathing time, and stood up quickly with his hands on the ground. He didn't retreat, his body jumped slightly, spit out a mouthful of bloody sputum, and assumed a posture ready for close combat, and said proudly, "You know, I can still fight like this for a day and a night." Hearing this sentence, the Winter Soldier paused for half a second, a flash of emotion flashed in his eyes, and then quickly dissipated, returning to his original indifference. "Bucky, come on. I'll remind you of me," Steve said bluntly with a light hook of his left fist towards the Winter Soldier 5 meters away. The Winter Soldier didn't speak, but waved his hands back. As if in response to his order, a new submachine gun with a full magazine was thrown from the accomplice behind. "You've really changed, don't you play like this," Steve smiled wryly. He dared not stay any longer. He turned around and ran towards the nearby bunker. As soon as he rushed a few meters away, the bullets chased and fired. "Could you come over and help?" Not far away, Natasha yelled loudly, fighting fiercely close to 4 or 5 armed soldiers. Her bright red hair was jumping and swinging like flames, her vigorous figure was sharp and full of beauty. "I can't get away from here," Steve responded helplessly, leaning against an abandoned yellow car. The other side of the car had been sieved by bullets. "Captain, there are more armed vehicles coming this way, there's less than half a minute left." Falk and Sam hovered tens of meters in the air, looked at the 2 people who were suppressed below, noticed the armed convoy whistling and galloping on the road farther away, and couldn't help shouting a warning. "This is really troublesome," Steve whispered, looked up at the helicopter carrier that was rising higher and higher, and said with instructions, "Don't worry about us, you go to the helicopter carrier first, Na and Natasha will be there soon." "Okay," Sam nodded. The mechanical wings trembled slightly, and flew straight to the sky like a goshawk, quickly flying towards the aircraft carrier a few miles away. However, his departure officially announced that Steve and Natasha had fallen into a situation of fighting between beasts together. The nearby bullets are still being suppressed, and the sound of enemy car horns in the distance is close to the ear. Steve leaned against the vehicle, thinking about countermeasures quickly, and finally sighed in frustration. We may not be able to escape. In the current situation, there is no room for a comeback. Are you going to give up, Captain? A mechanical voice suddenly sounded from the side. Of course not, Steve subconsciously replied, suddenly stunned, looked sideways, and saw a mechanical villain sitting on the back seat of the car. Steve asked curiously, "Who are you?" "My name is Weiss." The mechanical villain grinned out a row of steel teeth and said, "I am a cheater sent by Master Kyle to help you." Weiss, cheating? Steve was a little confused, but when he heard that Kyle had sent him, his face was filled with joy, and he let out a long sigh of relief. Kyle's shot must be reliable. "It's too late to explain. Get in the car," Weesey said coldly. Get in the car? Steve blinked, looked at the abandoned little yellow car that had been riddled with bullets, and opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. "Please fasten your seat belt." Weiss snapped his fingers, and his movements and tone imitated Kyle very much. Steve felt that he was in a stolen car, so he could only fasten his seat belt silently. From nowhere, Weiss took out a Krypton gold core, held it with both hands and opened his mouth to bite, and swallowed it. "Very good. The energy source is ready, and the transformation mode is ready to start." It jumped onto the co-pilot in vain, covered in abundant electric light, and its mechanical hands were inserted into the driving instrument as probes. Mechanical assimilation. Transformers mode. The outside of an abandoned vehicle. The Winter Soldier threw away the gun with its empty magazine and red muzzle, and was about to summon someone to switch the rocket barrel, when armed vehicles honked their horns on the road behind. "Stop. Put your hands on your head and squat down, immediately." Several teams of agents got out of the car and surrounded Natasha with guns, who had just beaten several armed men to the ground. Natasha snorted coldly, surrendered and squatted helplessly under the aim of a dozen guns. Nearly 10 armed vehicles that arrived stopped, surrounded the yellow abandoned car, and many agents swarmed out of the vehicle, pointing at the vehicle with guns in their hands. The leading agent captain warned coldly, "Get out of the car. If you don't get out of the car, you will shoot." But no one answered, and the scene was silent. Just when the agent captain couldn't bear it, the abandoned vehicle vibrated slightly, the taillights of the intact car lit up, and passionate electronic music wafted from inside. At this moment, even singing. Dozens of elite agents, members of Hydra, and even the Winter Soldier were stunned, and their brains froze. "Shoot me," the agent captain roared angrily. Chapter 287 Transformers Mode. "Steve, what is he doing?" Hearing the sound of music coming from the vehicle, Natasha, who was in handcuffs, felt incredible. When the captain of the Secret Service gave the order to shoot, her face suddenly changed. Bang bang bang. The agents fired collectively, and the bullets formed a dense rain of bullets, airtightly covering the surrounding small yellow cars. At the same time, a burst of white current was conducted from the inside to the outside, covering the damaged body with a sizzle. For just a split second, the little yellow car changed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The front of the car was raised in vain, the car body mechanically disassembled and expanded, the 4 tires shrunk inward, and the metal parts acted as the extension of the limbs. It is obviously an ordinary abandoned vehicle, but it shows a high-tech level of precision deformation, and it is reconstructed and assembled at an extremely fast speed in front of the eyes of the agents. Clang clang clang. The bullets densely fell on the shell of the deformation machine, and the sparks flew away, leaving only a few light white bullet marks. At this time, the little yellow car finally completed its final transformation. "My God, what mechanical monster is this? Alien creatures, robot giants," the agents gasped, raised their heads in shock, and looked up at the huge metallic monster in front of them. Their double feet could take a few steps back. It was a giant steel machine standing on 2 limbs, more than 8 meters high, with muzzled hands akimbo. A wing-shaped engine unfolded from behind. The whole body shell was still painted yellow as the original vehicle, and the mechanical eyes were twirling. "Look at everyone. This is how the same thing." Not only were they shocked, but Steve, who was sitting on the car seat inside the iron robot's chest, was also dumbfounded. "Great," Weesey's triumphant voice sounded, and explained, "This is the opinion of the Master, and it is also the newly discovered deformation ability after Tony and I have studied and modified armor for a long time. With sufficient energy supply, vehicles, helicopters and other machinery can be temporarily assimilated into part of the body, and thus start a powerful giant transformation. This is the Transformers mode, Weezy excitedly stated the principal. This is also the first time it has performed such a large-scale armor deformation. Cool. How does this work? Is there any weapon? Steve asked eagerly, rubbing his palms. Voice control. Weapons. There are simple cannon fires. Weezy raised his left hand while speaking, and there was a cannon fire equipment on his arm. The black muzzle aimed at the vehicles and agents surrounding him. Boom. The pounding and powerful bombardment sounded, and a laser shell was shot out, blasting an armed vehicle straight into the air more than 10 meters high, turned into a blazing fireball. Several agents around screamed and fell to the ground with serious injuries. The powerful aftermath of the shell explosion, the explosion waves and flames raged, and the gravel and dust were everywhere. This power, Steve opened his mouth wide. It's really good, but it consumes too much energy, Weiss said excitedly. This gun, switched to Krypton Gold energy, costs tens of thousands of dollars, and the speed of burning money is really unbearable for ordinary people. But Kyle is not short of money. Shoot and suppress, the agent captain roared loudly. But immediately after, another cannon shot landed at his feet, blasting his body into ashes on the spot, and part of the broken flesh and blood rained down on the surroundings. Explosions are art, Weezy shouted excitedly, feeling a certain nature in himself suddenly awakened. Nice job. But don't worry about killing the enemy yet. Save some energy. Go and save Natasha first. By the way, don't forget my shield, Steve said calmly. No problem, Weezy nodded in agreement, ignoring the various shots of the bullets. One step was a distance of 6 or 7 meters. He pinched the shield on his fingertips and rushed towards Natasha at a faster speed. Crack. Blocking the surrounding armed vehicles, Weezy stepped down and turned into a flat pile of scrap iron, and the agents retreated and fled in all directions. Seeing the mechanical monster running this way, several agents who were escorting Natasha fled in horror. The only remaining agent gritted his teeth and raised his gun, screaming and pulling the trigger to shoot. Overestimate one's abilities, Weiss sneered, rushed forward and kicked. The agent immediately flew out like a ball, his body threw up a wonderful parabola, and the man died in midair. It lightly grabbed Natasha, who was on the ground, and held it together with a shield in its shrinking palm. Just after finishing this action, a rocket ran and shot from the side, hitting the machine's left shoulder and bursting into flames. Under the power of modern rocket launchers, the left shoulder part of Weezy's giant mechanical body was finally damaged and split. Damn it, Weiss turned around angrily, and saw the Winter Soldier carrying a bazooka 20 meters away, standing on top of an armed car, looking at them with cold eyes. Bucky, Steve was also deeply helpless about this, and urged, don't pay attention to him, let's go to the helicopter carrier. Sam is waiting for us, and the inside plan will not be stopped any later. Okay, Wei thought for a while, and casually fired 2 shells at the area where the Winter Soldier was located. Several armed vehicles shattered and exploded, forming a raging sea of flames on the road, which greatly affected the pursuit of all the agents. Weezy continued to walk, the ground was trembling slightly, walked on the road and rushed towards the direction of the helicopter carrier. 10 seconds later, in the fierce sea of flames with constant wailing sounds, as the braking engine roared heavily, a cool black and gold motorcycle rushed out at an accelerated speed. The Winter Soldier's eyes were cold, and he locked onto the conspicuous yellow deformation machine, driving a motorcycle to speed up and chase after him until they go away. An agent took off his charred clothes and evacuated from the sea of flames. After hesitating again and again, he took out his satellite communicator and dialed the other side. Office of the Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. The phone on the desk rang, causing both Kyle and Pierce's eyes to fall on it, and the scene was silent and weird for a while. Go ahead, Kyle said. Pierce originally wanted to answer, but after Kyle agreed, he quickly picked up the microphone and put his hand on the speaker close to his ear. It's me. The agent didn't hide anything, and eagerly explained what he had seen and encountered before. Okay, I see. Pierce put down the microphone. His already gloomy face had turned livid and ugly. It seems that my card won. Kyle smiled instead. After he became a god, his 5 senses were so keen, no matter how hard Pierce blocked him, he could still listen to every word of the conversation at this distance. But even if he didn't listen, he knew the ending. If Weiss's steel mode before was still in an embarrassing situation compared to Iron Man Mark's armor, then the current Transformers mode can be considered to have completely embarked on its own evolutionary technological path. No need to spend time building, Just know the structure of the parts, assimilate the cars, fighters, and even starships that you can touch, and use them as materials for on-the-spot deformation and shaping. This is Weese's real way of fighting. Chapter 288 The End of the Nine-Headed Snake Organization. With wisdom, Steve and others can easily enter the helicopter carrier. No matter how strong the Winter Soldier is, he only has 2 hands, and even a headshot cannot prevent them from destroying the inside plan. It can be said that Weese sent by Kyle destroyed the original balance of combat power and completely reversed the situation in New York. General, the game is set. Kyle crossed his legs, calmly looked at the pale and bloodless Pierce in front of him, and asked, "Do you have anything else to say? Up to now, what else can I say? This time it's just you who won again." Pierce smiled miserably, remained silent for a moment, straightened his tie and hem, and said calmly and firmly, "But this battle is not over yet. One head of Hydra is beheaded, and a second head will grow out. Even if you kill me today and stop the inside plan, this is not the end, but just the beginning." What he said was the same as the Schmidt Red Skull, who came to an end in 1944. This is exactly the strength of the Hydra organization: pervasive infiltration, tolerance and stealing developmental abilities, and organizational dogmatic beliefs comparable to brainwashing. "Who said I'm going to kill you? The show is not over yet." Kyle chuckled, tapped his fingers on the table, and said meaningfully, "Don't worry, wait a little longer, maybe there will be a call later." When Pierce heard this, his pupils shrank involuntarily, and an ominous premonition filled his heart. At this time all over the world, in some unknown hidden corners, local wars are kicking off. In southern Iraq, under the remote mountains and rivers, a large base fortress is hidden in the dense forest, and is equipped with various high-tech hidden devices. For decades, no outsiders have explored and set foot here. It is only today that the technological restrictions and the tranquility of the forest have finally been broken. Boom! A black Golden Eagle starfighter broke into the forest and fired at the closed gate of the large base. Under the powerful laser cannon made by aliens, the protective cover only lasted for half a second before it was on the verge of collapse. Numerous Hydra-armed personnel jumped out in panic, trying to counterattack with firearms and shells. The starfighter was suspended in the low sky, and the ultra-technical metal shell ignored modern ordinary thermal weapon attacks, blocking the sky above the fortress portal and pouring energy artillery fire to its heart's content, until the large base was flattened into a sea of flames and ruins. Really exciting. Her beautiful eyes reflected the flames below. Luna sat in the driver's seat of the fighter plane, licked her sexy lips with her tongue, and held the manual device for controlling the guns of the fighter plane with both hands. Yu Tong on the co-pilot said softly, "It's almost enough, let's change to another target base." "Understood." Luna flicked her hair lightly, manipulated the driving instruments, and the fighter machine braked and whizzed away into the distance, leaving behind a piece of burned earth that suffered a devastating blow. Austria, at the bottom of a suburban valley. There is also a hidden large base here. With a slight sound of engines and bright lights, an Iron Man wearing high-tech armor entered the sky above this area. "Taste this thing." Tony hovered in the air, the shells on his shoulders were opened, dozens of small shells spewed out smoke, and bombarded the dome of the base building in a dense manner. There was a rumbling sound, and the flames covered the sky above the fortress, but after the smoke and dust dissipated, the building still stood intact, revealing a translucent energy shield. Seeing this, Tony said in a tempered voice, "It's really troublesome. Jarvis, help me find a breakthrough." "Yes, sir," Jarvis responded. But before it could analyze it, a flying creature flew past the Iron Man and flew towards the fort building without any hesitation. "That's..." Tony opened his eyes wide, inspected through the instrument, and saw clearly that it was a combination of 2 strange monsters. A tall black horse galloped with flames on its feet, and a 3-meter-tall green flame giant sat on its back, holding a broken battle axe in its big hand. The flame-treading horse carried hellfire and ran at high speed in the air, leaving a series of flame marks behind its tail. Arriving at the sky above Hydra's base, Hellfire jumped from his horse's back and fell from the sky like this, hitting the energy shield that was strong enough to resist small missiles. As soon as the energy shield encountered the green flame, a hole was torn immediately, and the steel plate on the top layer of the building melted even more when it touched the green flame. Hellfire slapped his butt, and sat straight inside the heavily guarded base. Jarvis said leisurely, "Sir, it seems that there is no need to find a breakthrough." Tony was a little confused for a moment, and shook his head helplessly. What kind of monsters are there in the Godfather's family? I'll leave it to him here, Jarvis, and then switch to the next target base closest to here. Jarvis set up the navigation, and quickly issued a reminder, Sir, the nearest target base probably doesn't need our help. Why, that should also be a large base. Tony was stunned for a moment, then suddenly thought of something, and asked, Who is there now? Bruce Banner, Jarvis replied. Forget it. Tony shrank his neck, and the scene of the Hulk roaring madly appeared in his mind, and he couldn't help but said with lingering fear, Switch to the next target base, at the border of Germany, about, kilometers away from the border town. Jarvis immediately adjusted the navigation and gave the best flight route. Okay, let's have a good fight today. With Tony's arms close together, the engines exploded in the palms and soles of the palms, and the flying speed broke through the supersonic speed and flew away in an instant. Hydra's large base has high-end combat personnel dedicated to solving it at the same time. As the team leader, Katu, who is wearing a black leather jacket and a demon mask, led a group of teams attached to family forces and underground organizations to carry out surprise attacks against more small and medium-sized bases of Hydra. General Thunderbolt and Colonel Ross did not send out troops. In order to avoid crowds in the army, they only issued death orders unilaterally and temporarily suppressed some intelligence messages leading to the high level, making this war hidden in the underground of the world even more serious. Covert perfection. Yes, perfect. It was a textbook annihilating assault. Breeding in the dark, the Hydra organization bases like tumors on the Earth suffered heavy blows one by one at the same time, falling silently and destroying them. SHIELD headquarters, director's office. From just now to now. In just 10 minutes, there have been more than a dozen calls. Pierce picked up the receiver, listened to it, hung up and then picked it up, repeating this action over and over again. The intelligence messages conveyed are all the same without exception. Finally, the phone rang again. Pierce stopped answering, and collapsed on the chair. His eyes were bloodshot, and his lips were tightly pressed. It's okay. If you cut off the head of your Hydra, it will grow back, Kyle shrugged, rarely speaking comfortingly. Pierce's eyes were wide open, and he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Chapter 289 Domineering Coercive Domain. For the head of a Hydra, it's fine to cut off one head, but this time, it will cut off 9 heads together. Judging from the phone calls I received just now, at least half of the bases are hidden underground in the world, and at the same time, they have been attacked by foreign enemies. Preliminary estimates are unimaginable serious losses, and at least tens of thousands of people's lives have been wiped out. And the traitor boss behind him, at this moment, is sitting on the reception chair in front of him, watching his jokes with his legs crossed. This is too rampant, too inhumane, too ruthless. Pierce's mind went blank. He was shocked and angry, his body was trembling slightly, and he didn't know how to describe this kind of behavior. The Hydra organization, which has always been good at plotting and doing bad things, will have a day when it will be pinned to the ground, ravaged and bullied. The phone on the desk stopped ringing, then rang again, showing no sign of stopping. Why didn't you answer the phone? Didn't expect it, your family's base is gone. Kyle didn't miss the opportunity to tease, with an expression of surprise on his face. Gritting his teeth, Pierce sighed weakly and asked, When did you make the preparations? In the old military base, in the memory of the scientist Avidar. I got this idea after obtaining the address files of your multiple bases, Kyle said, spreading his hands and said, but at that time, it wasn't the best time to attack. The best time is when the aircraft carrier is in the sky and the inside plan is launched. I understand. Against you, monster. Our Hydra deserves to lose. Pierce understood immediately, and smiled bitterly. Once Hydra puts its hopes of a comeback on the helicopter carrier and inside plan, the defense and vigilance of its own bases will be temporarily reduced to the minimum. This is a blind spot of common sense thinking. After all, it would be anyone who would concentrate their efforts to stop the peril plan that is dangerous to the world. Only Kyle's heart is so big, and the forces that can be summoned in his hands are divided into several parts, and only a few of them, Steve, are allowed to stop the helicopter carrier, and other more forces are sent to raid the Hydra base. It doesn't matter, your Hydra's head will grow again if it is gone, Kyle said with a smile. Can you not mention the head? Pierce's mouth twitched, looking at him hopelessly. This was originally a propaganda slogan, but now it has become a meme. The heavy damage suffered by Hydra this time is comparable to the fiasco during World War II. Since the disappearance of the Red Skull that time, Hydra has completely withdrawn from the world stage and lost its dominance that threatens the Earth. The remaining party has been hiding in the dark for more than half a century, and finally got a little bit of improvement with the help of S.H.I.E.L.D. But just as he was about to stand up again, he was beaten back to his original shape. Hydra organization, this time it is really coming to an end. The more Pierce thought about it, the more unwilling he became. His face turned red, and he finally sighed. It's a pity. In 1944, Schmidt should have eliminated you early no matter what, and just dropped a nuclear bomb on the recruit base to destroy you in the United States. Let the captain be buried. Who would have thought that the Hydra organization, which caused panic in the world and penetrated widely, was destroyed by two recruits who were born in the same military camp? Schmidt you're talking about is the guy I chased for dozens of kilometers with a long sword? As for the nuclear bomb, I seem to have experienced it myself. Kyle smiled indifferently, stood up from the chair in vain, looked down at Pierce, and said inexplicably, "You still don't give up? Since they are all called to the door, let's call them in." Pierce's face changed. He no longer hesitated, and pressed the invisible button under the table with all his heart. The mechanism clicked and started, and a part of the smooth ground opened a crack, and Pierce landed and retracted into the depression together with the man and the chair. At the same time, rattling gunshots rang out from outside the door. In the blink of an eye, the door of the office became a sieve, and the rain of bullets covered everything in the office, trying to obliterate the creatures inside. Kyle snorted coldly. The golden pupils of his eyes flickered, and almost transparent golden flames rose from his body surface, majestic, sacred, and extremely hot. The heat wave is coming. The hot wind swirled up countless papers and burned them to ashes. The indoor temperature soared all the way up, and the nearby tables and chairs immediately caught fire and spontaneously ignited. Countless bullets melted into molten iron before they were within half a meter of Kyle, splashing on the floor with a sizzling sound. "Stop him!" The door shattered and collapsed. A large group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and armed personnel, armed with various high-tech and firearms, surged to occupy nearly half of the office area, staring at Kyle on the opposite side like an enemy. The only enemy is also the strongest enemy. Out of control, Kyle sneered, knowing that this was Pierce sacrificing a soldier who was placed in S.H.I.E.L.D., and wanted to buy himself a chance to escape. But he didn't care. As long as there are members of Hydra that appear today, they will all die. The more you come, the better. Kyle ignored the threat of the armed crowd and walked towards the door. His actions made countless people on the field change their faces. "Stop for me," the captain yelled in horror. "I stop?" Kyle smiled, and took a heavy step forward, using Vulcan's power and gravitational traction at the same time. "Kneel down for me." The deterrent power of the god blood belonging to high-dimensional life, and the gravity increase of more than 10 times the force field traction, two seemingly unrelated abilities, when used together, immediately exerted unpredictable and significant effects. With Kyle as the center, an invisible domineering coercion rippling away, slamming across the surroundings like a transparent water wave, everything in the office fell into short-term stagnation in an instant. Swish, swish, swish. More than a dozen armed men fell to their knees in unison, with their heads, elbows, and knees heavily pressed against the floor, bent over and crawling tremblingly, unable to get up, and faltering and wailing in horror. Kyle continued to walk without even looking at them until he passed by the crowd and left. This is coercion enough to disturb the mind and body, which is equivalent to his unique personal domain, but this coercion is only useful to ordinary people. Until Kyle walked out the gate. A few seconds later, more than a dozen armed men collapsed to the ground, sweating profusely, gasping for exhaustion, eyes full of fear. Not a level of existence. "Wait a minute, my back is on fire, someone help me put it out," an armed man shouted in panic. The battle suit on his back was on fire. He rolled crazily on the floor on the spot, and the more he rolled, the more intense the golden red flame burned, until his body turned into a ball of fire. "My clothes are on fire, stay away from me, don't come my way." It was too late when they noticed that everyone had flames on their bodies. The golden flames consciously entangled their bodies, and it was obvious that they would not go out until the bones were burned. If you want to burn, burn it thoroughly. Kyle was walking in the corridor, listening to the screams and wailing faintly behind him. He continued to walk towards the elevator with neither joy nor sadness on his face. This fire has only just begun. Chapter 290 Bloodbath of S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. Headquarters. Pierce was obviously driven to a dead end. After knowing that the bases were destroyed, he wanted to burn the boat angrily. Emergency alert. Kyle, the symbol of peace, invaded the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, intending to kill Director Pierce and destroy the Insight Plan. Please go to the stairway to intercept immediately, and allow the use of any weapons and emergency measures. Repeat the notification again. The target enemy is Kyle, the symbol of peace. The siren of the headquarters building sounded suddenly and quickly, echoing loudly in every corner, and clearly reaching the ears of everyone in the headquarters. The technicians and elite agents were astonished and put down their busy work one after another. Some even suspected that they had heard something wrong with their ears. The halls and offices on each floor were silent for a few seconds, and then heated discussion like a nest exploded. Crazy, really crazy. The number one enemy that S.H.I.E.L.D. pointed at this time turned out to be a symbol of peace. Just like a son trying to beat his father, many people feel that their brains are not enough, and they will be overwhelmed for a while. What are you still doing? Didn't you hear the order? Move quickly, put on your weapon, and follow me. Some of the agents did not hesitate too much, and their actions were crisp and quick. Those who obeyed the alarm command put on their weapons and equipment, raised their arms and shouted to drive the atmosphere, and swarmed towards the stairs. Against peace symbols, what's the joke? A female agent muttered to herself, looking at the quick-moving agents. She couldn't help clenching the gun in her hand. If we say that a break between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Captain America has made many agents suspicious now, S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to move the peace symbol, which has completely awakened some people. It's time to stand in line. Should I continue to trust the Bureau's superiors, or choose to trust the peace symbol alone? It's just that this multiple choice question seems very weird and funny, but a long time ago, all New Yorkers gave the answer first. The main gate of the elevator has been closed by someone and cannot be used normally. Kyle didn't care. He directly chose to take the stair passage, and walk down the stairs step by step from the 36th floor near the top. The screams from the director's office were still in his ears, and there were dense and noisy footsteps from the stairs ahead. Give it all to me, the peace symbol must be killed. A group of armed agents rushed out from the floor and surrounded the stairs. When they saw Kyle, they pulled the trigger and fired a round of bullets from their rifles. From time to time, smoke bombs, flashlights, and high-explosive grenades are mixed in. Boom boom boom. The S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters seemed to be facing demolition and demolition. The whole building trembled, and near the top floor, the door and floor-to-ceiling windows were torn apart by violent waves. Hydra's real base is gone. These Hydra spies pretending to be agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., with red eyes at this time, are determined to die. Regardless of the damage to S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, they will use all weapons kill Kyle. They were determined to strike hard, and some dropped high-explosive grenades a few meters away, even ignoring the safety of themselves and their teammates. The effect is naturally significant. The original stairway was directly blown up. Billowing thick smoke filled the interior space of the top floor, and ashes symbolizing death fell profusely. The agents who survived the offensive all put on protective hoods on their heads, feeling uneasy in their hearts, and started scanning with the infrared sight line equipped with the firearms. The target is missing. Are you dead? How is it possible? The other party is. Their communication stopped abruptly, and a dark and tall humanoid figure gradually emerged from the smoky corridor. The long and narrow red eyes glowed faintly, full of inhuman emotions such as tyranny, killing, coldness, and wildness. Venom, full coverage state. A bunch of trash. You want to kill me like this? The dark demon made a hoarse voice, grinned softly, and took a big step forward. The wild and tall dark body brought extraordinary impact to people's vision. The agents gasped for air, their backs shivered, and the hand holding the gun kept shaking. The demon, it's the demon, one of the agents said in horror. In the data files of the Hydra organization, there are descriptions of the reasons for the disastrous defeat in World War II, among which there are key records about the number one enemy Kyle. In the night of battle, that man will turn into a black demon with an immortal body and wings, far exceeding the strength and speed of ordinary people, a monster that can only give up resistance when encountering it. Monster, die to me. Under the shroud of the fog of fear, someone in the crowd of agents couldn't help but let out a cry, and then a high-explosive grenade was thrown away, hitting the dark demon's face. Kyle didn't dodge, but opened his ferocious mouth in vain. Under the unbelievable gaze of the agent, he bit the approaching high-explosive grenade in one bite. Boom. An astonishingly powerful explosion erupted in the mouth. Kyle smashed his lower mouth unscathed, and spit out several circles of black smoke like smoking. Monster, this is a real monster. The agents who witnessed this scene were desperate, and their fighting spirit was gone. Driven by fear in their hearts, they threw away their guns and turned around to flee downstairs. Where are you going? Leave them all to me. Kyle grinned grinningly, and a coercion surged up on him, and swept out substantially. The agents who were still within 10 meters, their legs sinking with lead, staggered forward and fell to the ground. Once their heads were lowered, they could no longer lift them up. Die! Kyle strode forward, and from his tall and strong body, several dark and tough tentacles shot out like bullets. The tentacles pierced through the heads of the agents in an instant, linking their bodies together. Kyle dragged the corpse with his tentacles, and walked downstairs along the dilapidated stairs, leaving rows of blood-stained steps behind him. On the floor below, a new team of agents emerged, starting a new round of fighting. Kyle did not refuse anyone who came, and started killing all the way from the top of the building. The corpses were all strung together with a tentacle as a long rope. On the 36 floors, almost every floor has a local battle, but they all ushered in a complete end in a short period of time. Until you get downstairs. The main hall on the first floor was quiet. When Kyle walked out of the stairs, he looked up and saw nearly 100 agents standing in place. These agents did not intend to fight at all. After seeing Kyle, who was fully covered with venom, they hurriedly bowed and saluted, and said hello respectfully. Hello, General Counsel, General Counsel. Kyle was slightly taken aback, and suddenly remembered that during World War II, in order to avoid trouble when SHIELD, a reaction is pretty fast. Otherwise, let's kill them together as Hydra spies. Kyle scanned the hall, watching the murderous red eyes. All the agents on the field lowered their heads in fear. Leave these to you. I'll go after Alexander Pierce of the Hydra organization. Kyle gave an order, flicked his left hand forward, and the end of the tentacle dragged out a pile of corpses from the stairs. There were also nearly 100 agents in combat uniforms. Their chests and heads were pierced and tied together, and the blood on the wounds was still dripping down. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291, Legendary Hero, Kyle. SHIELD headquarters. The main hall of the building was dead silent. There was only the hideous rustling of hair and muscle and bone against the floor, and the ticking of blood trickling down the steps of the stairs. The agents on the field turned pale, and were too shocked to speak at all. Some researchers immediately bowed their heads and vomited continuously. How would you describe the sight in front of you? Calling it a massacre would be too easy. Hundreds of corpses that were not yet completely stiff, like chickens and ducks, were tied together with tentacles and dragged from the 36th floor to the first floor and downstairs. Blood washed the SHIELD headquarters, dyeing the entire building blood red, filled with a disgusting, stomach-churning bloody smell. No matter what the reason is, this is an inhumane killing. If the film is shot and released, it will undoubtedly cause great panic in civilized society. What's more, the shot is a legendary hero, advertised as a symbol of peace for loving and defending peace. If one is not careful, Kyle will even lose his reputation in this battle and bear the infamy of a ruthless butcher. Of course Kyle thought of this, but he didn't take it to heart. Agents of SHIELD, kill it, no need to give anyone an explanation. Where's Alexander Pierce? Kyle hadn't recovered from the full coverage of the venom, grinned ferociously, and asked Sin Lang, exhaling hot air. As a representative, a special agent shuddered and quickly replied. After the director hurried down from downstairs, he issued a warrant and left by helicopter. He said that he wanted to board the helicopter carrier himself to improve the inside plan. Okay, I'll kill him now, Kyle whispered, disregarding other people's feelings, and twitched to retract the blood-stained dark tentacles, leaving behind a pile of broken corpses with fatal injuries. By the way, from now on, Alexander Pierce will no longer be the director of SHIELD, and among you people here, there must be Hydra spies mixed in. From now on, no one is allowed to leave the headquarters. Walking out the door, Kyle said the last sentence, and the white and long dark wings with scales spread out from behind. He squatted down slightly, his legs were like tight springs, and he jumped more than 20 meters quickly with one jump. Reaching the highest point, Kyle flapped his wings back, and the hurricane exploded out of thin air. His tall body turned into a black streamer, and circles of white waves appeared on the spot, flying towards the direction of the helicopter carrier at a supersonic speed. After Kyle left, the fog of fear enveloping the SHIELD headquarters dissipated. Countless people on the first floor let out a long breath, looking at the pile of corpses in the center of the main hall with lingering fear. Is that murderous monster just now really a symbol of peace? Someone asked a question with a trembling voice. The agents collectively fell silent, which is of course a symbol of peace, but who dares to attribute this inhumane killing to the legendary hero? Isn't this the collapse of human settings? There is no need to doubt, that is Kyle, the symbol of peace, that is, the hero who stopped the Hydra organization and accelerated the end of World War II. A weak but steady voice suddenly sounded from the door of the building. Everyone looked along the source of the sound and saw a female agent pushing a metal wheelchair into the hall at the door. On the wheelchair lay a middle-aged and elderly black man with a bald head and bandages all over his body. His ferocious and dark face was not angry but mighty. Former director, Mr. Nick Fury. The agents were overwhelmed with surprise, and hurriedly bowed and saluted. Hello, former director. Okay, this farce should be over. Fury scanned the messy hall with one eye, looked at the grisly corpses, and sighed softly. I can testify that the Inside Project is a conspiracy to cause catastrophe on Earth. Alexander Pierce is a Hydra spy, Captain Steve and Deputy Director Natasha is not guilty, and S.H.I.E.L.D. is infiltrated by more than half of Hydra spies. As soon as the words fell, the agents were horrified, and at the same time they put their hands on the handles of their guns, vigilantly guarding the agents around them. But even if this is the case, the behavior of the hero Kyle is too. A researcher who fell limply on the ground vomited out bile. Even though he knew the truth, he still couldn't accept a brutal killing that took place before his identity was verified. Whether you accept it or not, this is Kyle's style of doing things, to control violence with violence. Fury shook his head and said, otherwise, how do you think the name of the symbol of peace came about? It was obtained by reasoning with the enemy and the law. This is a legendary throne made of dead bodies. This is also the biggest reason why he has been hesitant and does not want Kyle to solve the civil strife and S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury knew Kyle well. He has no worries as long as you stand on the opposite side of him. No matter whether your identity is good or bad, you will usher in the end of destruction. His killing intent was pure. Most of the murders are not out of emotion, just like pulling the lid of a can. Just because you want to drink the drink inside, you pull it cleanly. He is the one who has the least burden of a hero. Do things and actions as you like, and don't care about the opinions of others or the public. From the beginning to the present, you have never regarded yourself as a so-called symbol of peace. He never thinks about laws, morality, human nature, etc., and he doesn't need to think about it. He will only firmly do what he thinks is right. This is Kyle, the legendary hero of lawlessness. The hall fell into silence again, and some agents had a bit of understanding in their eyes. Kyle is no longer a superhero at the height he stands. He is more like an emotionless god. He treats the wrong things on the earth and will completely obliterate and change them, so that many people cannot accept the cruel treatment. As for what happened in S.H.I.E.L.D. today, it is classified as the top secret, and no one is allowed to disclose it. All the videos on each floor today are deleted from the source code and formatted, Fury said coldly. Kyle doesn't care, but it doesn't mean he doesn't care. Fury continued, in addition, everyone put down their weapons and are not allowed to hold weapons until the battle on the helicopter carrier is over. Now that we've reached this point, let's wash S.H.I.E.L.D. clean with blood, use fire to burn it back to its original appearance without impurities and pollution. Downtown New York, a kilometer above the center. The three helicopter carriers form a triangle, floating up at a distance of 50 meters, a bit like three steel islands floating in the ocean. At this moment, on one of the helicopter carriers, a fierce chase is taking place on the top deck. The huge yellow deformed robot, holding Natasha in its palm, was running with all its might. More than a dozen single-man fighters buzzed like bees pouring out of a nest, hanging behind the tail of the giant robot and chasing after it. Come and chase me, if you catch me, I'll let you out. In the process of running, Weezy turned around and used the loudspeaker to emit a powerful group taunt. Chapter 292 Battle on the Aircraft Carrier. As soon as Weezy's taunt fell, the fighter jets chased even tighter, and the two sides slowly closed the distance like a tug of war. But even if it entered the attackable range of 50 meters, the fighter plane still did not launch a thermal weapon attack for a long time, as if there were some concerns. Let me just say it. There is a 90.00% chance that they won't launch missiles. We are now on a helicopter carrier. If the carrier is destroyed, it will indirectly destroy the inside plan. Weiss, transformed into a transformer, is confident and uses radio wave frequency to convert it into normal voice to communicate with Steve in the driver's seat and Natasha in the palm of his hand. "It's as if we are the villains," Natasha complained angrily. "Destroying the aircraft carrier is indeed a solution, but the city of New York is directly below us, and the crash of the 3 aircraft carriers will still turn into catastrophe." Steve shook his head and said calmly, "I see. No wonder the master said you." Weesey bickered, and stopped talking in the middle of the sentence. It should be said that Steve is worthy of being the hero with the most humanity and sense of justice. He will put the safety of human beings first in everything he does and his actions, and Kyle, who uses violence to control violence and goes straight to the point, is simply 2 extremes. The original body of Weiss mobile phone was made by Howard, the life of the fire was given by Kyle, and the knowledge of armor was taught by Tony. In the data code of its mechanical soul, the 3 of them have firmly imprinted their attitudes towards people, how they deal with people, and their values in life. They feel that there is nothing that money and power can't solve. If there is, then add some more money and increase your strength. Weesey was thinking about it, when suddenly there was a sound of air disorder in the back of his head, and the alarm bell from the intelligence system sounded loudly. Its huge mechanical body curled forward into a ball, and quickly reacted to a gorgeous roll on the spot. Boom! A missile trailed a raging tail flame, roared past Weesey's head, and landed on the aircraft carrier deck not far ahead, exploding on the flat ground with a gorgeous and terrifying dust wave. Weesey quickly stood up again, and spread out the slightly closed mechanical palms. Natasha, who was squatting on one knee, stood up and raised her chest. Natasha raised her eyebrows slightly, and said to Weesey's previous system judgment, "Your 1% probability has appeared, and they actually launched missiles regardless of the safety of the aircraft carrier. It's not them, it's him," Weiss retorted. A silver fighter plane rushes to the front of the fighter jet group, and the inner cockpit can be seen through the windshield. The pilot is a blond young man with a metal mechanical arm on his left arm. Through the video broadcast of the back probe, Steve also saw this scene, and couldn't help whispering, "It's Bucky." He still caught up. Weesey didn't care so much. He turned around and raised his mechanical arm. The gun hole on his left hand was charged for a short time, and a huge daytime laser bomb was blasted out with a buzzing and trembling. The silver fighter had an early warning, skidding like a goshawk dexterously. The laser bomb scraped against the wing and missed, but hit another fighter jet behind it, destroying it on the spot by mistake. The fighter jet fell with thick smoke and turned into a ball of fire on the deck of the aircraft carrier. The fighter jets next to it could only speed up to avoid it. Bucky in the cockpit was ruthless. He manipulated the silver fighter plane quickly, aimed backhand and fired 2 missiles again, one left and one right flanking towards Weesey. "Here we come," Natasha exclaimed. "You don't need to tell me, I know too." The gun hole in the left hand was still emitting green smoke. Weesey stepped back a few steps, quickly switched to energy storage in the right hand, calculated the ballistic trajectory and timing, and intercepted the 2 oncoming missiles with just 1 laser bomb. Boom! The powerful collision of missiles and laser bombs erupted in the air between Weiss and the silver fighter. In just a split second, like explosive waves and light waves, they slapped violently in all directions, so that everything within 50 meters was affected and pushed outward. In the storm formed by the explosion, the helicopter carrier shook and sank, while the fighter jets in flight stagnated and retreated a little, and the unlucky ones were blown away by the super cyclone. At the same time, there was a surge of turbulence in the black-gray explosion, which was also accompanied by the roar of the cylinder of the engine accelerating. In the next moment, a dilapidated little yellow car full of bullet holes rushed out of the explosion range and rushed towards the boarding direction of the aircraft carrier deck at full speed. In the car, Steve and Natasha, who were sitting in the driver's and co-pilot's seats, were still in a daze. Why, changed back, Steve couldn't figure it out. With most of his scientific and technological knowledge from the World War II period, it was difficult to understand the actual combat situation of mechanical armor technology. Natasha took a deep breath and asked, "That's right, the energy cannon with the machine is so powerful, why don't you get rid of the fighters behind it first? You two, I have some bad news for you. I'm running out of battery," Weiss explained very bluntly. "What did you say?" The 2 people in the car were stunned, and subconsciously looked at the rearview mirror of the car. Led by the silver fighter, a dozen fighter planes continued to chase after the car over the dust wave of the explosion. The race to the death is like repeating itself. But this time it was a helicopter carrier at an altitude of, meters, and about 10 advanced fighter jets were chasing an old yellow car. This situation can be regarded as the first time on Earth. At this critical moment, "You said the battery is out." Natasha was speechless. Wissy sighed humanely, and said helplessly, "The conversion rate of Krypton gold into electrical energy is too low, and the unfinished transformer mode seriously consumes energy. Even if the whole Krypton gold has fired nearly 10 energy bombs, it's also nearly exhausted. Now I can still maintain the car mode instead of changing back to the original, which is not bad." Then now, before Steve finished speaking, he heard a slap, as if something heavy had fallen on the roof of the car. Wissy gave a hint. "A Birdman is back." "Birdman? Is that Sam?" Steve was deeply surprised. "It's me." A black uncle lay on the roof of the car with sunglasses on his eyes, poked his head out of the windshield, and tapped the window with his fingers. "Did you find the console to reset the aircraft carrier system?" Steve asked, but he still had the chip to restart the aircraft carrier. "I found it. It's right under the next aircraft carrier, but I don't have permission to enter," Sam said quickly with a serious face. "Also, there was a helicopter carrying the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. to the aircraft carrier just now. I went, because I was escorted by a fighter plane. I couldn't intercept it halfway." "Thanks a lot," Steve replied, and Wissy asked urgently, "Do we have any reinforcements?" "Usually there must be, but now everyone else's." Wissy's answer came to an abrupt end, and his voice tremblingly said, "Reinforcements are here." Chapter 293 One Reinforcement. Under the bright golden sun, on the aircraft carrier against a metallic light. Under the galloping pursuit of the fighter jets, the little yellow car carrying Steve and others was driving desperately at an appalling speed that was several times higher than the speed limit. The weak electric light wrapped around the whole car, the engine and exhaust pipe had become hot red, and the four wheels were constantly emitting thick smoke and sparks. The front of the car was raised slightly by the strong wind, as if it was about to soar into the blue sky. Sam retracted a pair of mechanical wings, rolled over and down, and entered the rear seat from the open door. "Reinforcements? That's great. How many are there?" "One person." "What?" In the car that continued to run at high speed, after a short conversation, it fell into a long silence again. The silence was not completely broken until the fighter jet group launched a missile offensive. The butt of the car seemed to have eyes, either dodging left or right or flying at a high speed. The missiles fell and bombarded the surrounding aircraft carrier deck. The intensive and powerful bombardment turned the steel floor with a radius of 30 meters into a sea of flames. Despite not being hit head-on by the missiles, the car's shell was still battered and shattered, with electric sparks sparking from the scorched parts. The deck of the aircraft carrier was severely damaged, and several huge holes had been broken to see the interior of the aircraft carrier. "It's not an option for us to run away blindly," Sam said with his brows furrowed. "That's right. No one stopped." Director Pearson restarted the aircraft carrier procedure. "We will lose in the end." Natasha nodded in agreement. "The fighter group behind is too troublesome. We must first find a way to solve it." Steve spoke calmly. Anxiety appeared between his brows, and his brain was racking his brains to think of countermeasures. Hey, didn't I tell you that we have reinforcements coming soon?" Wissy reminded again, paused, and then quickly changed his words. "It's not coming soon, it's already here." At the rear of the car, a fighter jet was about to launch a missile. The steel belly under the fuselage broke open in vain, as if something sharp pierced into it, and then the fighter jet was cut into two pieces through the fuselage. Flames and thick smoke sprayed from the fracture, and the upper and lower parts of the fuselage flipped at high speed and crashed down on the deck below. The missile also caused a secondary explosion, blasting a tragic black hole out of the aircraft carrier's shell. The reversal happened so fast, not only the other pilots flying the fighter planes, but even Steve and others who had been reminded earlier were stunned. "Call out." The black streamer running through the fighter plane slowed down and stopped at a high altitude between the car and the fighter plane. It was a tall, dark creature, with bulging muscles that were extremely domineering and wild, and its long and narrow scarlet eyes looked down at the fighter jets coldly, and shrugged its shoulders when it fell on the little yellow car. Wissy's deformed car came to a sudden brake. The four wheels rubbed against the deck fiercely, and slowly stopped amidst the exaggerated splash of sparks. The moment it stopped, the car collapsed as if scrapped. The wheels all collapsed into a flat shape, more than half of the engine melted into molten iron, and the whole car was blowing out high-temperature steam. Steve and the others got out of the car coughing and looked up at the dark creature that turned the tide of the battle. That creature, destroyed an F-22 fighter jet. Sam slapped himself lightly, covered his painful face, and opened his mouth even more unbelievably after getting rid of the dream. It also has mechanical wings and can fly freely, but if he is allowed to face a fighter plane, it is undoubtedly suicide. Advanced fighter. This is a technological weapon for human beings to conquer the blue sky of the Earth and defend the supremacy of the air. Let unknown dark creatures be destroyed with bare hands? Weiss, why didn't you say earlier that the reinforcement is him? Natasha recognized the identity of the reinforcement, took the lead in letting out a sigh of relief, and patted her still beating heart soothingly. What's that? Steve asked in surprise. When he saw the dark creature, he had a vague sense of familiarity, but because he hadn't seen the full coverage of the venom, he didn't associate it with the acquaintances he knew. Weiss got out of the scrap car, jumped onto Steve's shoulder, and said firmly and respectfully, "That's the master." "Master, you said that was Kyle." Steve froze, staring at the dark creature in the air. As if noticing his gaze, the dark creature lowered its size and said in a hoarse voice, "What did you do?" "So embarrassed. It can't be helped. It's old and out of date, and can't keep up with the pace of the new era." Steve spread his hands and laughed at himself. "Leave these to me. You go to intercept Alexander Pierce, and restart the system program of the helicopter carrier." By the way, as soon as Kyle finished speaking, a missile flew towards him quickly. He turned his head, and the muscles in his left hand swelled and shaped into a black hammer. "Don't know the rules, interrupt me." Not dodging or evading, Kyle lightly swung the hammer in his left hand, and slammed it at the missile that arrived in front of him. Boom. I don't know if this is a missile self-detonation or a heavy hammer. The turbulent blast wave also covered and buried Kyle's body. With a flutter of wings, the strong wind blows away the mist of the explosive waves. Kyle was suspended in the air unscathed. Black smoke flowed from the heavy hammer, and the wreckage of a missile fragment was held in the other hand. Tier fighters by hand, shake missiles hard. Facing this extraordinary ability, the brains of everyone on the field were in a state of confusion. And this is just the beginning. "Back to you." Kyle let go of the palm of his right hand, and the wreckage fell naturally. His right foot was lifted back in coordination, and the strength of his whole body naturally gathered, kicking the metal wreckage out like a football. It was obviously just a piece of metal wreckage, but at this time, under the kick of more than 10 tons, it turned into a different kind of metal cannonball, spanning a distance of 50 meters in the blink of an eye, and collided with a silver fighter that was still accelerating forward. The silver fighter had already made dodge maneuvers in advance, but it was only rubbed by the extremely fast metal wreckage, and half of the wing burst and broke on the spot. The out-of-control silver fighter flew obliquely downward, and when it was still 10 meters above the deck, the protective hatch of the cockpit bounced open, and the Winter Soldier jumped out decisively from the pilot's seat. Boom. The crash of the silver fighter plane caused the aircraft carrier, which had been bombarded by missiles and was riddled with holes, to sink to a height of 10 meters. Under the deterrence of terrorist forces, the rest of the pilots were terrified and drove the fighter planes to turn around and retreat, keeping a certain safe distance in the high-altitude encircling. This is Kyle's overwhelming dominance now, the overlord of the Earth, the god of the Earth. The Winter Soldier fell to the deck floor, rolled several times in succession, stood up expressionlessly like a robot, and stared coldly at Steve and the others in front of him. Tread. A black shadow passed by, and Steve and the others took a closer look. Kyle was already standing in front of them, facing the Winter Soldier. "Kyle." Steve took a slightly nervous step forward, putting his hands on the strong muscles of Kyle's waist. Kyle understood Steve's intentions, and said bluntly, "I understand what you mean. No one will rob Bucky with you. You can deal with it yourself, thank you." Steve nodded, holding the adamantine shield, past Kyle, and walked towards Bucky step by step. One hit, one hit." Kyle shook his head and whispered, then turned to look at the rest of the staff behind him. For Steve and Bucky, it's not easy to be a middleman. He is male on the left and right, so it's right to stay away in this situation. Chapter 294 The Power of Helicopter Carriers. Owner, Weiss in the form of a small machine jumped on both feet, stopped at Kyle's feet, and bowed down to salute in a gentlemanly manner. A piece of Krypton gold with full energy value is enough to support the interstellar spaceship of Sokka to travel through the Milky Way. It can make Tony's steel armor continue to fight fiercely for a whole day, and it can be converted into electricity for New York City for 10 minutes. How can it fall? Do you wear it out so quickly? Kyle glanced at it and reprimanded it angrily, but while raising his palm, He pulled out a blue item card. He converted the card into a brand new Krypton gold crystal, and threw it to the open space beside his feet. Wissy's eyes were slightly bright, and he didn't care about the gentleman style, so he rushed forward excitedly, just in time to catch the glowing Krypton gold, opened his mouth and stuffed it into the black mechanical gear teeth. With a rattling sound, Weiss lay on the deck of the aircraft carrier, took the Krypton gold he held in his hands as food, crushed it into energy block crystals, and swallowed it, replenishing the depleted body energy that was approaching shutdown crisis. Prodigal, Kyle shook his head helplessly. This single Krypton gold can empty out the background of the rich and local tyrants on the Earth. Wissy's Transformers mode of combat is purely burning money, using money to smash others to death. Fortunately, such Krypton Kyle has a huge inventory of nearly tens of thousands. Hello, Patriarch. Natasha pulled Sam's arm. She took a step forward and knelt on one knee on the deck to salute respectfully. Mr. Kyle, Sam scratched his head, but he hadn't gotten used to it yet. The dark creature that symbolized killing and evil turned out to be a legendary hero that everyone admired as a symbol of peace. The existence of the peace symbol and the dark creature represents two extremes respectively, but the identity of the two is the same person at this time. Patriarch, this is the program chip for restarting the aircraft carrier. It was originally given to Steve by Fury, and Steve just gave it to me, Natasha reported to work, spreading her clenched palms, lying on the palm of her hand. 3 green chips. Each chip corresponds to a helicopter carrier, and all 3 chips must be inserted into the console of the carrier to take effect. Is it the key to dissolving the Inside Plan? Kyle whispered coldly, stretched out his big hand, picked up the program disk with 2 fingertips and looked at it. Under the shocked gazes of Natasha and Sam, Kyle gently crushed the chip into fine powder with his fingers. Patriarch, what are you doing? Natasha's beautiful eyes widened in surprise. Wee is enough, and there is no need for the cumbersome way of restarting the aircraft carrier with chips, Kyle said calmly. Natasha and Sam turned their gazes to Wissy, who was still eating Krypton gold. Wissy woke up from a dream and explained, that's right. I forgot to tell you that as long as I have enough energy and I am on an aircraft carrier, I can directly control the satellite and modify the system instructions of the aircraft carrier. While speaking, Weiss stretched out 2 antennas from his forehead, and his feet plunged into the steel of the aircraft carrier deck, and the faint electric light extended along the deck to the interior of the aircraft carrier. The eyes of the machine flickered, a series of codes flashed, and the torrent of data was running at a very high speed. After 3 seconds, Wissy clapped his hands and said, okay, now the aircraft carrier we are on is under my control. It's that simple. Natasha and Sam glanced at each other, feeling speechless. They were so busy with things they couldn't cope with. How did they solve a third of them so quickly? Don't believe me, Weiss proudly raised his mechanical chest. Without power, it is indeed a waste of copper. But just not Krypton gold, fully charged. Wissy is now on the Earth. It is above the top technology, a unique and extraordinary mechanical intelligent life. A mere Earth satellite, the radio waves can follow the signal track of the aircraft carrier, cross the satellite protective wall upwards, and forcibly modify the aircraft carrier system instructions that have been set. So at the current stage of time, what level of power does the top technological product publicly created by the Earth helicopter aircraft carrier have? Kyle thought to himself, grinned coldly, and licked his lips ferociously with his tongue. Weiss, try it, immediately. But how should I try? Weiss shook his head excitedly, and when he looked up and saw the group of fighter jets hovering in the air, he suddenly realized that it was the best experimental target. I have never seen the power of this aircraft carrier before. Wissy's antenna was erected, and the aircraft carrier, which had been bombed by missiles and had already been riddled with holes, began to tremble violently under the instructions conveyed. The large and small turrets on the aircraft carrier's shell seemed to have a sudden temper, and they were all activated. The automatic adjustment of the gun holes up, down, left, and right quickly aimed at the fighter group hovering obliquely above. Countdown, 3, 2, 1, fire, Weiss said majestically and confidently like a commander. Following its words, the crumbling aircraft carrier that had been severely damaged turned into a super-large Gatling, and dozens of hundreds of gun holes fired at the same time according to the instructions. Boom, bang, bang. Countless shells and missiles slanted out, dragging long tail flames and smoke, forming a destructive rain curtain of shells, covering the, meter area above. And the, meter area is the circling and watching area for the enemy fighter planes. Things happened too fast, and the remaining 9 fighter planes didn't have enough time to dodge or escape, and they were overwhelmed by the bombing tide formed by numerous shells in a blink of an eye. The blue sky was filled with gunpowder smoke, the white clouds were chaotic and shredded, and the explosive waves spread out and enveloped less than half of the New York City area. At noon on this day, people in New York could clearly see the explosion cloud that was far more gorgeous and tragic than fireworks as long as they looked up. Sam said with emotion, "With this power, it's no wonder that 3 helicopter carriers can destroy the elite talents among human beings in a short period of time. After all, it was secretly built by S.H.I.E.L.D. for several years," Natasha said naturally. "The firepower is no less than that of a starfighter, but the helicopter carrier is too bulky." Thinking of this, Kyle couldn't help grinning. Don't be too greedy. Regardless of whether it is clumsy or not, the original intention of the aircraft carrier is not to be flexible and to fight alone, but to serve as a mobile giant base fortress and a transit station. Weiss, convey the system order to drive this aircraft carrier outside New York City, Kyle ordered. Do we not want this aircraft carrier? Weiss asked. It's all seriously damaged. Why keep it? Let's grab a new one. Kyle raised his eyes and looked at the other 2 intact helicopter carriers 100 meters away. Patriarch, it's not a robbery, it's ours, Natasha smiled. Don't say we are like villains, but why do I feel very excited? Sam said with a wry smile. Different from Steve step by step, Kyle's rhythm, one word, cool. Chapter 295 Invincible Kyle. Almost over. In the full coverage state of Venom symbiosis, Kyle's tone is cold, without a trace of humanity and emotion. With his dark appearance and violent style of doing things, he really looks like a ghost from hell. Natasha and Sam stood respectfully behind him, obediently, waiting for Kyle to issue orders. Master. Now that the helicopter carrier has crashed out of the New York City area, what should the 2 people who are still on it do? Weiss asked the question, and the gazes of several people followed the shells and the crashed fighter plane deck looking out. Gunpowder smoke and flames raged everywhere, steel holes caused by missile bombardment, and the shattered wreckage of fighter planes flew everywhere. Among them are 2 tall blonde youths, one holding an adamantium shield that can absorb kinetic energy, and the other relying on a mechanical technology arm that can hit several tons of impact. They fought fiercely and entangled each other, fighting back and forth inextricably, each other's sweat and blood spilled on the surrounding steel floor. You don't need to worry about the battle between Steve and Bucky. The bond between the 2 of them is too deep, and they have a life-threatening friendship. Even if Bucky is brainwashed, the subconscious will not kill Steve. Kyle can see clearly. The comrade-in-arms friendship between the 2 has been verified for more than half a century. The best interpretation of love and kill is probably nothing more than this. Kyle waved his hand and said to Weiss in a cold voice, issuing a program instruction, "Let this helicopter carrier fly out of New York City, and land in self-destruct when it arrives in an uninhabited remote suburb." Neither of them is ordinary people. It's not that easy to die. Yes, Master, Weiss nodded in response, immediately erected the antenna, and edited and modified the autopilot route of the helicopter carrier. This is too casual, right? Natasha and Sam looked at each other, and silently mourned for Steve for 3 seconds. The helicopter carrier trembled slightly, stopped rising towards the sky, left the original triangle area, and moved out of New York City at an accelerated rate. The first ship, there are 2 more, let's go. Kyle's face was indifferent, and he stretched out a pair of dark wings. After Weiss clung to his strong left shoulder, he jumped heavily on the spot, and 2 sunken footprints clearly appeared on the steel deck. Accompanied by the fierce wind, there is also the sound of a gas explosion that exceeds the speed of sound. Kyle turned into a black streamer and left the deck, heading straight to the second helicopter carrier as the connection center at high speed. On the original aircraft carrier. Bucky, wake me up now. I'm Steve. Have you forgotten me? Steve started fighting while fighting, but unfortunately the Winter Soldier was unmoved, his 5 fingers made of mechanical metal clasped tightly, and his left arm bombarded the shield powerfully with the help of technology. The shield absorbed most of the kinetic energy, and Steve couldn't bear to retreat again and again, retreating to a hole in the deck before barely stopping. The raging flames couldn't stop the Winter Soldier, whose heart was as firm as ice, and approached him expressionlessly, wanting to kill the enemy in front of him that made his brain rippling with memories. 30 meters away from the battle between the 2, Sam asked Natasha, Are we really leaving Captain Steve alone? Natasha parted her lips slightly, and said with a light breath, the head of the family is right. This is a battle and a battlefield that belongs to the captain, and it is not convenient for us to intervene. Trust him, we have survived all wars and difficulties, and there is no reason to lose in their own hands. Well then, I trust him too. Sam clasped his hands slightly, and pressed the control button tied to his palms. The metal backpack on his back immediately spread out his steel wings, slightly flapping the hot and cold high-altitude air around him. Let's go, hurry up, Sam offered his left hand out. Natasha grasped Sam's hand and said in a deep voice, the owner is going to the second helicopter carrier. Let's follow to see the situation first. Okay, the engine of the mechanical wings started, and the soles of Sam's feet were off the deck, pulling Natasha away from the first aircraft carrier, and chasing towards the trajectory that Kyle flew away just now. The helicopter carrier with billowing smoke and flames, carrying Steve and the Winter Soldier, flew towards the sun that was falling into the mountains and rivers in the west. At an altitude of 2,000 meters, the second helicopter carrier, next to the central console. The helicopters were parked next to each other on the deck, and 4 armed men with guns surrounded the console, fully alerting the surrounding area. In the protected area formed by them, Pierce stood alone in front of the console, quickly typing on the keyboard with both hands, performing personal control and manipulation, and wanted to modify the program instructions just like Weiss. According to Hydra's original Insight plan, the helicopter carrier needs to climb to a height close to the atmosphere before it can operate with Hydra's activation, lock on a large number of targets in the Americas and a large range, and carry out long-range and precise bombardment strikes. But now the ascent height has not yet been reached, and the calculation has not yet been officially started, and many bases of Hydra have been destroyed one after another. Pierce even took off his suit jacket. The long white shirt he was wearing was wet with sweat, his face full of hatred and resentment twisted slightly, and he tapped on the console keyboard with all 10 fingers. Kyle, the symbol of peace, you forced me to do this. I must use the entire city of New York to bury the brothers of Hydra, Pierce groaned inwardly, approaching the final stage of reprogramming the command, and just as it was about to be completed, a radio wave suddenly impacted and poured into the console from the floor. Zizzy white electric light burst and splashed from the keyboard. Pierce was taken aback, retracted his hands, wiped his eyes and looked at the computer screen, only to see an ace in the devil card emerge there, with a funny mechanical smiling face attached. At the same time, there was a dull falling sound behind him, as if something had landed on the deck of the aircraft carrier. Pierce turned around stiffly, and saw the muscular dark creature squatting slightly on the steel floor of the deck. As long as he met its scarlet eyes, his body and mind felt as if he would fall into a sub-zero icehouse. Symbol of peace, here we come. The 4 armed men subconsciously pulled the trigger, and the enhanced version of the modern firearm fired. The blue flames flickered on the muzzle, and the bullets turned into tiny laser lines, shooting horrible holes in the steel deck. But when it hit Kyle's tough and shiny black venom skin, all the steel bullets flew out ineffectively, and landed on the ground with a tinkling sound, forming a chilling sharp contrast. Kneel down, Kyle said coldly. His sharp eyes swept away, and the 4 armed men did not resist. Under some powerful pressure that suppressed their bodies and minds, they let go of their guns, bent their knees, and crawled on the ground in fear, unable to move. Alexander Pierce, do you have any means? If you don't use it, you will lose your chance. Kyle stood there, looking down at Pierce on the console, with a hint of teasing and playfulness on his face. Now he, apart from the unborn Ancient One mage, is invincible on Earth. Pierce clenched his fist stubbornly. He is the temporary leader of Hydra and the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D. But at this moment, looking at Kyle in front of him, an invincible enemy, Pierce's teeth began to chatter, and the muscles all over his body began to tremble involuntarily. Even the soul that thought he was noble and unyielding in his heart began to tremble. Chapter 296 Little Ancestor, Mysterious Man. Am I afraid? The muscles on Pierce's face twisted slightly, and he pressed his chin with both hands in a hurry, as if he was trying to stop his ugly teeth from making noise. Unfortunately, even the palms of his hands trembled up and down along with his chin, and every muscle in his body was instinctively showing various fierce characteristics. Sweat wet the shirt, dripping onto the hot deck floor, and a few wisps of white steam sizzled. I lost completely. As long as this man exists for a day, the Hydra organization will never have a chance to stand up, and can only hide in a dark and gloomy corner to survive. Pierce smiled miserably, and, like the other four armed guards, knelt down facing Kyle, who was fully covered in venom. He was not affected by the coercive ability with force field traction, but bowed his head and knelt down because he could not see the future of the Hydra organization to see the light of day again, and the collapse of the belief as the spiritual pillar. The dim sunset light fell on Pierce, making him look even more lonely and old, making him look like a bereaved dog through and through. It's fine if you don't do this earlier, and you still have so many tricks. As long as you are on the earth, how can you escape? Kyle shook his head lightly, and the strong and tough dark cuticle on his body began to return to black lime liquid, and the bones were lumpy. It penetrates into the clothes underneath and disappears and merges. After a while, it returned to silver hair, broken gold pupils, a young and handsome face like a knife, and a tall and strong perfect human body. Venom transformed into a spacious black windbreaker, which was draped over Kyle's body under casual clothes. Without a trace of blood, even if it was stained with bloody smell, Kyle was like a gentleman who came to a banquet, and he didn't have any sense of sight of killing people like crushing ants. Kyle smiled, stepped forward, and said, "Red Skull should feel lucky." He touched the Rubik's Cube on the fighter plane, so that he might be exiled outside the Earth with his life. He walked past the armed men, and under the coercion, the four of them stuck their entire bodies to the floor tightly. After the last desperate struggle of their self-esteem, they all tilted their heads and mouths, foaming and dizzy. Kyle walked up to Pierce, stopped half a meter away, and looked down at the back of Pierce's head indifferently. You can't kill me." Pierce didn't dare to raise his head, and said with a trembling tone. "Reason." Kyle shrugged. Pierce took a deep breath, gritted his teeth forcibly, and said, "Before this, I have raised the conjecture that I might be framed to death to the United Nations agency staff and U.S. congressmen. This is a seed. If you kill it like this me, then this seed will start to germinate and grow darkly, and sooner or later, your inhumane demonic atrocities will be criticized and denied by the world. That's right, there's indeed a hidden danger." Kyle nodded in agreement, and said with a smile, "But if you don't see that day, you will die here. If it is really a symbol of peace in the minds of the people, perhaps they will not kill the enemy, and finally sanction the trial through the legal channels recognized by the people. It's a pity that before his status as a symbol of peace was false, he was Kyle, the time-traveling reborn. Everything he did was right, and if there was a mistake, erase it." Kyle was too lazy to continue talking nonsense, and snapped his fingers lightly. A golden flame ignited between his two fingers, and the temperature within a few meters around him increased by more than 10 degrees in an instant. "You cannot do that." Pierce's body trembled, intensified, and when he sensed that death was coming, he couldn't help shouting hoarsely, "Little ancestor! Don't you make a move yet? You promised to help me stop the peace symbol, but now I'm about to die, so I still refuse to show up." The slightly funny cry for help spread far away on the high-altitude aircraft carrier deck, but no one responded. "Little ancestor?" Kyle frowned and looked around. Except for the four armed men who fainted, there was no one else on the second aircraft carrier. Have a nervous breakdown? Kyle didn't think too much, facing Pierce, flicked his fingers, and flicked the golden flame away from his hand. The golden flame, which seems to be extinguished by the wind, contains the supernatural power of burning at high temperature. If it falls on a person's head, it might even melt the skull. Pierce crouched on the ground with his head in his arms, and the golden flame fell down suddenly, and just before touching the back of his head, there were almost transparent subtle ripples in the air in vain. The golden flames collided with the transparent ripples, annihilated little by little, and disappeared without a trace. "Who?" Kyle's face turned cold, and he turned his head quickly. At some point behind him, there was a little dwarf standing quietly. He is less than 1 meter tall and thin and wide, covered from head to toe by a black cloak and windbreaker, completely unable to see his appearance and real physique. That is, neither humans nor aliens can detect it. "Finally I see you," the mysterious man seemed to be laughing, making hoarse and overlapping ethereal voices. "Anyone from the Hydra organization?" Kyle asked coldly. Since the two were 5 meters away, he couldn't see the ability card on the other side. But just now, the ability to easily neutralize Shinhiro seems to have a strong sense of space. Yes, it is space. For Kyle, who has been in contact with the original Space Stone, he will never admit that it is the derivative ability of the space class. Mage, mutant, and artificial man experimented with a Rubik's Cube? In just a short moment, Kyle has already had many guesses in his mind. The mysterious man had a pair of small eyes, as if he had been staring at Kyle, and replied, "I am not a member of the Hydra organization, but that uncle helped me find you, and I promised to save his life. My mother once warned me, never break your word and break your promise." "Then did your mother warn you to be on guard against enemies?" As soon as Kyle finished speaking, he tapped his toes on the floor, and flew towards the mysterious person at such a fast speed that after images appeared in his vision, even leaving a light white airwave in place. He was eager to make a move, not because he had a strong desire to kill, but because he really wanted to see the ability cards on the opponent. Space is respect, time is king. Even the lowest level of these two types of abilities are divine skills that directly lead to the mysteries of the universe. This is also why the Ancient One mage can use his mortal body as the strongest guardian to resist a multidimensional invasion of the Earth alone. Kyle moved abruptly, and the mysterious man didn't retreat or dodge. What's more, the distance between the two was only 5 meters, and the card information only needed to be read within 3 meters. It can be said that 2 meters is not a distance at all, but 10 seconds later, Kyle is still advancing at a high speed, and the distance from the mysterious man is still short of the initial 5 meters. This short 5 meters is like the long distance between the sky and the star field. No matter how fast you run, you can't get closer by even a centimeter. Chapter 297. How is it possible that I didn't move? With a flash of his figure, Kyle stopped suddenly, turned around and saw Pierce lying on the deck behind him, trembling slightly, looked at a mysterious man in front of him seriously, and asked in a deep voice, "Did you do it?" "I have always been stay where you are, it's not standing still. You've already run in nearly, meters, but I set up a small space maze, allowing you to circle back and forth in and out of it." The mysterious man also explained the principle very seriously, and raised his hands in front of his chest, gesturing with his fingers and imitating movements to explain carefully. Flutter. A scorching golden flame surged towards it. The mysterious man waved his left hand, and the natural and smooth space moved mysteriously. The flame was swallowed up by the light blue space turbulence 3 meters away. The menacing flames, high temperature, and sound were peacefully smoothed out by the waves of space. "Who are you?" Kyle asked with serious eyes. The other party's attainment in the use of space ability has been so strong that it is a bit unbelievable. If Kyle had the suspension ring in his hand, he could use space spells to launch an offensive, but now Kong has extraordinary power, but he can't even get close to other people's bodies. This is the unsolvable part of the space ability, one of the strongest abilities derived from the evolution of countless race talents. If he didn't know the character of the Ancient One, Kyle really thought that the appearance of the short and mysterious man in front of him was an evil taste of the Ancient One. However, spells at least have recognizable gorgeous special effects, and the display and use of the mysterious person's special ability is more like a derivative of the cosmic Rubik's Cube and the original Space Stone, which is a pure and powerful special ability. "The original Space Stone fell into your hand," Kyle frowned and continued to ask. This was the first time he encountered an enemy that made him extremely curious since returning to Earth. "You have too many questions, and I don't have time to answer them even if I want to." The mysterious man curled his lips angrily, and said hoarsely, "I don't like the environment here. I can consider answering your questions in another place, okay, as long as it is within the scope of the Earth. Anywhere will do." Kyle immediately agreed, because he is a bold person who is not afraid of the other party's trap. "Then stand still." The mysterious man opened his hands, and the light blue space energy, like the wind, entangled himself and extended to 5 meters away. Kyle raised his eyebrows lightly, letting the familiar space energy wrap himself, and had the illusion of summoning the rainbow bridge to cross the cosmic star field. Kyle was more certain in his heart that the mysterious man's ability was closely related to the Space Stone, and at the same time, he felt a sense of intimacy spontaneously from it. "Are you?" Before Kyle finished speaking, his figure flickered, and disappeared from the deck of the second aircraft carrier together with a mysterious man. Hoo. The cold wind blew along the vast and boundless deck. Except for the fainted armed personnel, Pierce was the only one kneeling on the console. After Pierce didn't hear the voice of the conversation, he tried to raise his head timidly, glanced around in surprise, and muttered ecstatically, "Really? Gone?" After lying on the ground for a few seconds, Pierce confirmed that Kyle had left. Then he stood up with difficulty, brushed off the dust from his expensive suit, and whispered joyfully and coldly, "Peace symbol. Let me run away this time. It will be the biggest mistake of your life." Even if the Hydra organization is destroyed, one day, I will make a comeback by myself, Pierce roared inwardly. With anger and hatred in his eyes, he regained his faith and ran towards the helicopter. Just at this time, the shadows of the two people were close to falling on the deck, and there was a slight sound of being cut and slapped by sharp objects in the air. Push. The steel wings were slightly retracted and landed. Natasha landed first, and then Sam completely retracted the wings and landed on the deck of the second aircraft carrier. Where is the patriarch? Where did he go? Natasha was a little surprised, looking at the uninjured and fainted armed men on the ground. Looking at the bullet marks on the ground, it seems that there was a brief battle here, but it ended quickly. It should be done by Mr. Kyle, Sam said. His sharp eyes wandered around and saw a person on the side. He couldn't help being stunned, and stretched out his hand to hold Natasha in front of him. What? Natasha turned sideways, followed Sam's prompt to look, and immediately met Pierce's eyes with his hands on the helicopter, who was about to flee. The three of them stared at each other, and the scene was very strange for a while. Pierce's face was unprecedentedly ugly, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help twitching. While shrinking his body into the helicopter cabin, he said with a forced smile, "Well, I have something to do, so I'm leaving first." Natasha and Sam looked at each other. Both of them showed meaningful smiles, squeezed their hands into fists, and walked towards the helicopter in tacit understanding. "Why are you in such a hurry? Let's have a good chat. Director Pierce, Deputy Bureau, if you have something to say, talk about it." On the deck of the second aircraft carrier, howls and screams sounded like slaughtering pigs, and they were uploaded to the distant sky at the high altitude of the setting sun. On the other side, Europe. Just a moment ago, it was still the deck of an aircraft carrier with cold winds and steel equipment everywhere. The next moment, you are already in the charming night city streets with neon lights. The two styles of quiet and lively form a sharp contrast. With a sense of unreality like a dream, Kyle stood by the bustling street for half a second, and the vehicles and pedestrians on the road around him came and went like a torrent of water. Fortunately, he has exited the Venom full coverage mode, otherwise, with the terrifying appearance of the dark monster, it would cause panic among the people as soon as he was teleported here. Another point is that the mysterious person who sent him here is gone. "Sir, are you okay?" A gentleman with a mustache in a black dress with embroidery and bow tie on his chest stepped forward and bowed slightly to greet him politely. Kyle looked up calmly, and found himself in front of a luxurious building. "Sir, this is the TUO Bird Club. Do you have a membership card here? If not, you can come in and find out," the gentleman with a mustache responded politely. As a waiter of this high-end club, he has more than 10 years of work experience. How rich is he? I have never seen a powerful person before, but this is the first time I have seen Kyle's aura of a natural strong man. TUO Bird Club? Kyle's heart trembled violently, his long-standing memory was pried open, and some fragments flashed through his mind for no reason. Cards of roses, late parties, hugs and dances to songs, TUO Bird Club. Does it still exist after so long? Kyle's voice was low, with a little complicated meaning on his face. No, our TUO Bird Club is the oldest high-end ballroom club in Europe. It was built in 1940 and has been renovated more than 10 times. It has been preserved to this day. It is one of the most popular clubs for European nobles and upper-class people. The gentleman with the mustache said this proudly. It is rumored that during World War II, a legendary hero also came here to consume as a customer. Kyle didn't listen, but passed the other party in silence, walked up the steps step by step, and walked towards the open grand door of the club. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298, the restarted number 006 card. TUO Bird Club. The location of the building has not changed at all, but it has expanded to both sides, making it look more spacious. There are still steps and red carpets in front of the club building. The entrance is still brightly lit and has a pleasant atmosphere. Inside the entrance is still a low-key and luxurious old-style reception desk and corridor. Stepping into it can make people experience the elegant atmosphere of celebrities decades ago. "Sir? Sir?" After the mustache waiter followed and yelled softly, Kyle speeded up and walked across the threshold in a trance, looking at all the familiar layouts and items in the club. Since leaving here last time, not to mention this dance club, even Europe has never been back in the blink of an eye. More than 60 years have passed. What is right and wrong? This is right and wrong. Things are still there, and can be disguised by new things, but some people are never seen again, disappearing in the long river of ancient times. This is an unavoidable tragedy for all living beings in the Marvel Universe, except for a few races. What on earth did you bring me here for? Facing the empty air, Kyle whispered coldly, and quietly clenched the 5 fingers of his hands that were hanging down. Now there are not many things that can touch his human side, but it just so happens that the TUO Bird Club is one of them. Sir, please. 2 tall gate guards in suits, with backs and waists, their eyes full of vigilance, fell on Kyle, who was standing at the door. One left and one right stepped forward to stop him and drive him out. After all, the TUO Club is a social place for celebrities. People without certain status are recommended by members. Not to mention the membership card of the club, they are not even eligible to enter the gate. And those who have a membership card, after a few years, they will not be mistaken. The 2 guards stepped forward and stretched out their hands aggressively towards Kyle, but the next moment, all their movements stopped abruptly. A powerful coercion in the form of a substance, pressed down like a mountain. Breathing out lightly, Kyle let go of his clenched fists, ignored the guards on both sides, continued to walk into the well-lit corridor, and walked to the reception desk where the waitress stood. "Hello, sir. May I help you?" The waitress on duty turned pale, and hurriedly greeted Kyle, and secretly glanced at the 2 guards not far behind Kyle. The doorman, who has retired as an elite Russian special forces, at this moment, the 2 reluctantly supported each other, and kept waving their hands to wipe the cold sweat from their foreheads, as if they were panicked by some kind of fright. What happened to scare the fearless Russian guy like this? Kyle thought for a while, and calmly said to the waitress, "I want to check the consumption record information of the number 006 membership card." He originally came here for the mysterious person, but now, what he wants to ask is another question. The consumption record of the membership card. The waitress was stunned, and said with a distressed face, "I'm very sorry. Our computer system authority is not qualified to read the consumption records of the membership card, and the membership card number 10 is the membership card of our club. The specially made Supreme membership card will only be issued to members and guests with special identities, and no one has the right to view the cardholder's consumption records." System permissions. What is this? Kyle smiled, tapped the screen of the electronic watch with his fingers, shrugged and reminded, "Weiss, it's time for you to play a role." "No problem, master," Weissy responded immediately, and extended an antenna to use radio waves to invade the host data of the building where the club is located. "Sir, what are you?" The waitress was feeling puzzled, and then, the reception desk, the corridor, and even the lights of the entire club building went out in an instant. The light flashed a few times as if the line was in poor contact, and then returned to normal lighting. Immediately afterwards, Weissy's voice sounded again. "I found it, master, show me." Kyle's eyes flickered, and he gave an order in a deep voice. "Rebroadcast for you." Weissy's eyes turned bleakly, and a three-dimensional graphic was projected, clearly listing the consumption records of the membership card in numbers and English. Kyle took a cursory glance, and the first record was the first consumption record in early 1944, that is, the day when Steve crashed into the ice in a fighter plane and came to hold a late dance after his return. There are detailed records on the number of people, consumption amount, etc. above. The consumption time is only accurate to the year, month, and day. It should have been only a handwritten record by the clerk. Later, after the computer became popular with the public, it was re-registered into the computer system for storage. After that day, he gave the 006 card to the waitress to pass on to Peggy Carter. Kyle looked down and was suddenly taken aback. At the end of 1944, there were more than, consumption record messages, all of which recorded the use of Peggy Carter herself. At the end of 1944, the date of the last consumption record was less than half a month away from the date of death recorded on Peggy Carter's tomb. It's unimaginable that a woman who is seriously ill and dying frequently comes to this TUO Bird Club almost every day. If there are no relatives or acquaintances here, it means that there are precious memories that she will never forget. Carter, Kyle muttered to himself. At this moment, he remembered many things, and the picture of the memory finally stayed at the parting with Carter. The farewell kiss under the evening sun. Kyle shook his head lightly, withdrawing his emotions from the human side, and rationally looked at the bottom of the recorded image shown by Weiss. From 1944 to 2007, there was a blank, that is, after Carter's death, no one used the 006 card to spend here. Until 2008. This year, this month, a day ago, there was a consumption record that has not ended yet. Who actually used Carter's card? Kyle didn't even have to think about it. The figure of the mysterious man immediately appeared in his mind. Have you opened a single room? 301. After reading the last important message, Kyle picked up Weiss on the table, and the figure disappeared from the spot in a flash, turning into a blurry black shadow and passing the corridor at high speed. The waitress opened her eyes wide, looking like a hell. She was about to scream when someone else's big hand covered her mouth. While panicking, she took a closer look and saw that the person holding her mouth turned out to be her own guard, the two tall and strong Russian men, and then she calmed down a little. What are you doing? Why didn't you stop that man just now? The waitress asked, puzzled. Stop? How do we stop? One of the guards smiled bitterly and said, you haven't recognized who is that just now? Who? The waitress blinked. The other doorman patted his chest with lingering fear. You guys talk about it all day. About a legend who came to the club during World War II? No way. The waitress was a little dazed for a while. She was silent for a moment, her mouth opened wide in surprise. By the way, I even forgot such an important thing. Number 006 is the number the TUO Bird Club handled for her. Chapter 299. See you in the next world, at the end of the volume. Did it use the elevator? Just less than half a second. A black figure passed by the luxurious and magnificent corridors of TUO Bird Club and the lively dance hall, and went straight to the third floor by the revolving wooden old-style stairs. Kyle's face was stern, and when he arrived at the door of the first room, he stopped in vain. He didn't even have time to look at the door number plate, and turned to push the palm outstretched against the closed door. As soon as Kyle's palm landed on the door, a palm print was sunken on the front of the carved door because of not controlling the strength well. The strength of pure power seemed to swing around like an invisible impact. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening sound, the metal lock of the doorknob was bent, the parts connected to the wall of the door burst and fell off, and the whole door was thrown open and flew into the room. In the luxuriously decorated interior, expensive clothes such as men's suits and women's skirts are torn and fallen. Earthquake? What happened? On a big red bedroom, a man and a woman were shocked. After they reacted, Kyle had already arrived at the bedside. His broken golden pupils were extremely cold, and he glanced at the indoor space indifferently. The woman froze for a moment, looked down at her body, and then screamed and dived into the quilt. The man looked at Kyle in panic, and tremblingly dared not speak out. Sir, what's the matter? Kyle didn't respond. With the flow of divine power and the traction of the position, the coercion formed hummed like water waves, and the man and woman on the bed fainted before they could hold on for a second. Master, you went wrong. This is not 301, it's next door, Weese's voice reminded him with a delay. Don't tell me sooner. Kyle turned around decisively. Instead of going out the door, he kicked his left foot against the wall of the room where he was. Under the sound of rumbling explosions, the wall seemed to have been damaged by a bomb blast, revealing a huge gap that could allow people to pass through, and the room was instantly connected with room 301 next door. In the air of dust and gravel, a small shadow sat on a chair in the lobby of room 301, looked towards Kyle, and whispered to himself with inexplicable emotions, sure enough. Just like what she said, you are straightforward, extremely, and impatient, and you haven't changed the slightest after all these years. Who the hell are you? Why do you have Peggy's card? Why did you bring me here? Kyle's voice was cold. Looking at the mysterious man, he asked questions without interruption. He didn't go forward again, just 5 meters away, knowing that it would be impossible to get close to an ability user who is proficient in the mysteries of space. By now, have you not thought of the answer? Or, you have thought of it, but you are still unwilling to admit the mistakes you made? The mysterious man didn't know whether he was laughing or crying, and made an extremely ugly change of tone. Kyle didn't speak. Some guesses, perhaps as early as 60 years ago, flashed in the subconscious, and then buried in that period of history together with the fragile humanity of ordinary people. He has indeed become stronger, and he has become even more ruthless. The height of evolution has caused his bone marrow, blood, and even genes to reveal an undisguised unique nobility, which is incompatible with ordinary people around him. But no matter what, Kyle's soul is still a human being, a traveler of a distant parallel Earth, and this essence will not change even for thousands of years. Connected rooms 301 and 302 until the dust settles. What's your name? Kyle suddenly asked inexplicably. The mysterious man was slightly stunned, and hesitantly gave an answer. You can call me Apostle. I still like this title of hero. Kyle shook his head and insisted. I'm asking about my real name. The mysterious man paused and said in a slow tone, Luke. Luce Carter. Luke. That's a good name. Kyle nodded, raised his left wrist, and said directly to Weiss in the form of a digital watch, Weiss, add a name to the Carl family register file, and it will be called Luke Carl's done. Okay, Master. Weiss immediately obeyed the order. You really? Facing this scene, Luke shook his head helplessly, and stood up from the chair. Okay, it's time for me to leave. When Luke was speaking, the night wind happened to blow in from the window, blowing across the messy room, without blowing even a single sleeve of his cloak. Under the slightly dim light, his small body was changing from real to virtual. The shadow cast on the floor was no longer clear, and the portrait seemed to evaporate out of thin air in the room. So that's how it is. Kyle only glanced at it, then said thoughtfully, you don't exist in this world, or in this Marvel universe, as expected of you, Luke said with a smile. That's right. Others are fine. As soon as I get close to you, I will be rejected by this world and exiled to another world. In our world, this is called rejection by the Savior, Rule, but it's worth it to come to see you. When Luke said this, his feet had disappeared, leaving only the phantom of his upper body, projected on the wall like a 3D projection that was unreal. Kyle has never been a person who is good at expressing emotions, so he said calmly at this time, is there anything you want me to know? Of course. Luke nodded, looked directly at him and said quickly, you don't need to use the original space stone. It's always by your side, but you can't see it yet. I already know this. Kyle nodded, and a subtle arc was drawn at the corner of his mouth. I am afraid that a long time ago, when it was still a card, it was like an ability card, which gradually established a connection with my body and subtly influenced it. Transformed the Constitution gene. He paused, and continued, if I have descendants, maybe they can control the derived ability of space roughstones. Luke's remaining upper body trembled slightly, and he opened his mouth to speak, but found that the voice could no longer be transmitted as the return stage was approaching. He could only raise his hands and quickly expressed his meaning in sign language. Goodbye to the next dimension world. I'll go and bring you back. Kyle's words were very confident, and he waved his hand in farewell. When the last shadow of the mysterious man was left, he said very calmly, you just said that you made a mistake at the beginning. Maybe it wasn't a mistake, but it was right. It's too obvious. The last phantom of Luke disappeared, and the feeling of blurred space fell silent. These words echoed subtly back and forth in the room where Kyle was the only one left. Kyle stood there without moving. After a long silence, Weiss asked tentatively, Master, just now, the name I asked you to register, did you register it? Kyle asked. Registered in, Weiss responded quickly. That's fine. As for other things, even I don't know much about them. Let's slowly figure them out later. Kyle thought for a while, stopped staying, and walked out the door to leave the room. Luke is really gone. What he said is leaving this world. The world in that sentence does not refer to the Earth, the Milky Way, the human kingdoms, or the universe governed by the 9 kingdoms. Instead, another parallel universe. Big world. Where are we going? Weiss continued to ask. Nowhere to go. The control of the remaining 2 helicopter carriers has been seized, and the finishing work will be handed over to Fury, Steve and Tony. The farce between Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. can be officially declared over after that. There will be no large organization on Earth that can provoke a civil war. After Kyle concluded, he added a meaningful sentence. It's time to go home. Chapter 300. Half a year later, a new chapter. As Kyle said, when the Hydra organization used the helicopter carrier for the Insight plan, one of them was severely damaged and fell into a lake outside New York, and the other 2 were taken over by the artificial intelligence god after Weiss snatched the control of the satellite and moved to the Carl family, placed above overseas bases. In addition, most of Hydra's hidden bases around the world were besieged and wiped out by the Carl family and the newly established Avengers Alliance. Only a few remnants of the damaged ones continue to survive. Possesses the ability to pose a peaceful threat to Earth. However, the strength of the S.H.I.E.L.D. situation is up and down. After this turmoil, both personnel and property and materials suffered heavy losses. However, After Kyle's violent alliteration, and later Yutong specially used the mind-reading ability to perform a second cleansing, S.H.I.E.L.D. was a blessing in disguise. This has become a truly spy-free world-class organization. Former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Frenick, after announcing Director Pierce's crimes, announced his official comeback as the third director of S.H.I.E.L.D. This Civil War farce, after Kyle's shot, can be said to have won a complete victory. Of course, there are also imperfections. For example, Captain America Steve returned from the outskirts of New York alone after fighting the Winter Soldier. His handsome and dirty face was full of despair and helplessness. For example, Luna did not find the two siblings Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch among the Hydra bases, and they were suspected of being urgently transferred to other places by the remnants of Hydra. What's more, Kyle, the symbol of peace, also returned to the Emgren building in New York alone, and has never been out since then. The finishing work of liquidating Hydra was completely entrusted to family members and alliance members, and he did not take the initiative to intervene. He seemed to have little interest in it, and even the civil strife that endangered the Earth did not take it too seriously. Kyle seemed to go out casually, slapped a buzzing and annoying fly to death, and then went home to take a nap without hesitation, letting the outside world be so noisy. Countless politicians or the media wanted to see him, all were turned away. It took a month for the Hydra turmoil and the Earth's civil strife that destroyed the Hydra to calm down a little bit. S.H.I.E.L.D. began to rebuild. After the return of superheroes and the birth of hero organizations, the surface of the Earth world once again restored its original stability and peace. Half-year later, 2009, early autumn. United States, New York City. In the bright sunshine of the early morning, there are many modern steel buildings, the breeze is blowing gently, the temperature is just right and pleasant, and the streets and alleys are gradually becoming noisy due to the activity of office workers. A black two-cylinder motorcycle drove slowly across the street. Wearing a smart leather jacket and jeans, a young man with black hair seemed to be very interested in everything in the city, and his eyes kept looking back and forth at everything around him. His name was Eddie Brock. He was a recent college graduate, but he was a real licensed reporter from Today. "Boss, please have a cup of hot milk and a hot dog burger." Parking the motorcycle by the side of the road, Eddie got off, waved his hand and shouted at the breakfast stall on the side of the road. "Okay, take the milk first. Please wait for the burger." The elderly stall owner grinned, poured a glass of milk and handed it over. Eddie took it, raised his head and drank most of it, and let out a light breath. "It's cool." This unassuming and bold scene amused the stall owner. He grilled hot dogs and hot hamburgers, and asked cheerfully, "Young man, I don't think you are a local, and I have never seen you before." "Yes. I just graduated from Columbia. I'm a reporter. After finishing my internship, I applied to work at the head office in New York a few days ago. I flew here yesterday, and I haven't reported to the company yet," Eddie said with a smile, and at the same time, his eyes were still gloomy looking at the city. "It can be seen that you like New York City very much," the stall owner laughed loudly, feeling good for Eddie. "It's not that I like New York, it's that young people all over the United States and the world love and yearn for New York, and hope to settle down here." Eddie took another sip of milk, wiped the remaining stains at the corners of his mouth with his hands, feeling a little emotional. "Say, New York, the city of economy, the city of tourism, the city of evolution, the city of peace, the city of aliens." Eddie perfectly interpreted the occupational disease of being a reporter. Once the chatterbox was opened, he couldn't stop at all, especially Alien City. "I like the name. You know, other countries or cities around the world are still arguing about aliens. On the issue of aliens, New York has begun to communicate, deal with aliens, and even prepare for confrontation. Yesterday, I walked around the downstairs of the rented house. Many places have warning signs for aliens. Even the public toilets, in addition to being separated for men and women and for the disabled, there are actually public toilets for aliens. Also, for some young people who are still in school, the mainstream discussion topics are actually sports and fitness, as well as about the development of human genes, evolution to become stronger, unnatural phenomena, metrotechnology and ability mutations." Eddie couldn't help laughing, gestured with his hands and feet, and became more and more excited as he spoke. The stall owner also laughed, handed over the hamburger, and said with gratitude and respect, "Actually, there's still a stigma of the city of sin, but since half a year ago, the crime rate in the city has been decreasing day by day. As for travel, and novelties like evolution, peace, and aliens are all because of that one." Eddie's eyes lit up slightly, naturally showing admiration, and blurted out, "A symbol of peace, Mr. Kyle, The stall owner was cheerful, and half seriously, half jokingly said, "Young man, you are still a reporter when you first came to New York. Let me warn you first, don't speak ill of Kyle and his old man here, otherwise you will be the president. Even if you come here, you can't be protected. The locals in New York can drown you even if they spit on you. I'm not that stupid." Eddie took the hamburger and looked around. Even the casual clothes of passers-by on the street mostly had devil card symbols branded on their tops. Kyle, the symbol of peace, may be the reason he was born in New York, and there are families and forces stationed in the center of New York City. The older generation of locals here who have ended World War II regard him as the savior. With his return, the light of the legendary hero completely enveloped the city, making it unbreakable within half a year. In other areas, the peace symbol might be big enough for heroic fame, but here in New York, the peace symbol is a living human god. It is not an exaggeration for the local residents of New York to say that they are believers in the symbol of peace. After eating the hamburger and drinking the milk, Eddie said firmly when he paid the money, "My dream is to be able to do the first exclusive news interview for Mr. Kyle in person one day. Then you need to work hard. I see you, young man." The stall owner smiled encouragingly. Interview with a symbol of peace. This should be one of the ultimate goals of a journalist's career all over the world. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.